Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto x Salem x Ozma x Blacksmith? Part 1. Huge shout out to NeonZangetsu for this story. If you want more awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Somebody turn out the lights. Naruto squawked angrily as his world, which had been nothing but darkness only a moment before, was abruptly flooded with just that. Light. Much light. So much light. It was everywhere, everyone, everything all at once, and no matter which way he looked, there could be no escaping it. Naturally, he tried to do so by closing his eyes like any sane man would, but there was a problem with that. Still too bright. His eyelids did nothing at all to shield him from the more sunshine. If anything, they made it worse, because the dimness only reminded him that there was more light out there to begin with, and he heard a woman's voice somewhere above him. He's not crying, Ozma. Why is he so quiet? Is he alright? They wanted noise? Fine. He'd give them noise. A frustrated wail tore free from him. Wait. That didn't sound like him. There, dear one. Warmth soon followed. He had the strangest sensation of being held soon thereafter, wrapped in a blanket and nestled close against something soft. A woman's gentle hum filled his ears, soothing his spirit. You're safe now. Safe? He didn't feel safe. Memories were slow to trickle back in, like a water from a leaky faucet. He remembered dying. He remembered pain. He remembered screams. What had killed him? He couldn't remember. He wanted to, but he couldn't recall. It slipped through his grasp, memories in the rain, no matter how hard he tried. One big blank. But after that, he remembered a tree? Yes, there was a great glowing tree. There had been someone standing there before it. A blacksmith. A woman made of metal and other things too, but mostly metal. Oh? It's not often a soul finds its way to the ever after. Perhaps you can do me a favor. I'd be willing to resurrect you in exchange. Tell me, how do you feel about rebirth? Or perhaps reincarnation? There had been a bargain? He was sure of that much, but without warning he was wrenched to the right, so much so that he couldn't help but yelp. Oddly enough, the sound seemed to mollify the woman currently holding him. There, that's better. He still couldn't see straight. It was as if someone had draped a fine film over his eyes, preventing him from seeing anything beyond indistinct shapes and colors. Between one blink and another, the veil was torn away. Her skin was a pale, ashen gray, the color of smoky snow, her eyes a piercing red with dark sclera. He would be well within his rights to call this woman terrible and terrifying. Indeed, her presence, though pale in comparison to Kaguya, was nothing short of immense. And yet she looked upon him with such love, as though he were the very center of her world. Look at him, Ozma. He's perfect. I never thought I'd be grateful for this accused immortality. Ozma was apparently a tan man bearing silver eyes and ashen hair, his body wrapped in a blue robe. Really, all he was missing was a pointy blue hat and long beard. Everything about him screamed mage. Or wizard. Like the storybooks, you know? All the ones he had read as a kid. But why did everything look so big? He glimpsed his reflection in a nearby window, and much to his chagrin, the pale visage of a newborn gazed back at him. Oh, that was why. His eyes were a piercing shade of aquamarine blue, his head covered with a fuzzy dusting of pale blonde hair. Whiskered cheeks, too. Aghast, he turned his senses inward. Power! He cows feel it welling up deep inside him, not unlike his chakra, but different all the same. Speaking of which, where was there it was. Weaker, but still present, a spire of strength for him to latch onto. That just left. Kurama? Hello? Anyone home? There was no response. None. His situation and appearance, while distressing for him, delighted this Salem to no end. Look! She exclaimed happily, quite overjoyed to be a mother. He has my old hair color. And my eyes. He does indeed. But he needs a name. Here at last, Salem faltered. I haven't thought of one. Naruto blanched. Please don't be lame, please don't be lame. In the end, Ozma took up the torch. Ozymandias? Salem shook her head. Too grandiose. Ajpin? Too tacky. Oswald? Too old. Oscar? Too boyish. Ozma sighed. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. Salem sniffed innocently. Nonsense. Very well, then perhaps Oliver. Ozma. No, he thumbed his chin, considering that's my name. Although I wouldn't mind Ozma Jr. A bolt of black light sizzled into the ceiling above, cutting him off. Naruto would have laughed, had he the lungs for it. Instead, he snickered silently while Salem swore. We are not naming him any of those, she exclaimed angrily, brandishing a finger at her husband and his father like a weapon of mass destruction. Which it probably was, given her power. He is a prince. Prince, our son. He needs a name befitting of royalty. Not one that begins with the letter O, for goodness sake. Then I'm afraid I'm quite at a loss. The wizard shrugged helplessly, wholly at a loss. Perhaps you have a better idea. Here at last Salem panicked. He saw in her eyes, heard it in her voice, as she clutched him close. Don't look at me. I was trapped in that terrible tower most of my life, and in isolation after that. I am absolutely awful with names. I can't possibly think of a good one for him. Naruto sighed internally. And I'm no better. Ozma prodded her. At least make the attempt, my love. She whimpered, courage faltering. But the only names I know are from storybooks and scrolls. What if he doesn't like them? I am sure he will let you know. He certainly would. Fine, then. She scrutinized him for a moment, pale brow furrowing. How does Salas strike you? Ozma shook his head, denying it outright. Not nearly bald enough. Fair point. He has a full head of hair. Let's see. Anakin, then? Naruto made a horrified noise. Don't you dare! I don't think he likes that one, dear. I can tell. How about Magnus? Ozma vetoed it. Unwise. Frodo? Is he to toss a ring in a volcano, then? Salem hissed at her husband, teeth bared, red eyes glowing. Now who's being unreasonable about this? Ozma pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled in a long-suffering sigh. Salem, I adore you, truly I do, but your taste in names leaves much to be desired. Why not say something simple? She gave him a piercing look. Something beginning with the letter O, perhaps? Ozma coughed into a fist. Yes, well, perhaps I was a bit overzealous before. Still, there are many names, just waiting to be found. Surely we can agree on one? Naruto huffed. It certainly didn't seem like it. We are literally deciding this child's future. Salem reached down to stroke his cheek fondly, drawing his gaze back to her. His name must be perfect. He will be a general, an emperor, an overlord. Any name given to him has to evoke awe, dignity, and above all, power. It is something that will belong to him for the rest of his days. We mustn't choose lightly. Yes, well, when you put it like that. His new parents were quiet for quite some time, perhaps the better part of a minute. And then, quite suddenly, Salem snapped his fingers and exclaimed aloud. I have it! Nero! Ozma thumbed his chin anew. As in that famous warrior with the cursed arm? The one we laid to rest just last year? Yes. She seized upon his works like a lifeline. That one. The charismatic fellow with white hair and a devilish grin. Many a fair maiden swooned in his presence, and he had several wives besides. Our son shall be greater still. In giving him his name, we shall both honor his legacy while looking to the future. You just liked his name, didn't you? Nonsense. Salem sniffed indignantly, and looked his way in stand. What say you, son of mine? Do you approve? She really thought he could understand her, didn't she? Well, he could, so she wasn't wrong, but still. Naruto didn't find himself opposed to it. Nero. Yes, it had a nice ring to it. He would have preferred something along the lines of Bowser, Shadow, or maybe even Megatron, but again he was terrible with names. He sounded the name out in his head, dragging it out, tasted on his tongue. It sounded close to his old name. Even started with an N and ended with an O. Yeah, he could get used to that. He couldn't speak just yet, but he could smile and make a noise of approval to signify his agreement. Salem noticed at once and crowed proudly, like a broody raven preening over her eggs. Ha! He approves! Victory is mine! I wasn't aware this was a competition. Naruto let them banter back and forth, not minding their argument. It seemed to be something of a running theme with them. With this, he now had a new name, a new life, a new body, and obviously, most important of all, he had new parents. For an orphan boy who had never truly known his family until well after their deaths, that meant the world to him. Here were people that, while he didn't necessarily know them, he was aware of them. He was blessed to have his mind intact, which meant, even as an infant, he could remember their names, their faces, every aspect of them. He did his utmost to carve their facets deep into his mind, where he would never forget them. He wouldn't let anything happen to them. Not like Minato and Kushina. There would be no reliving that awful night where he'd lost everything. He'd been weak and powerless then, unable to save them from themselves. Not so now. He would be strong, he would be invincible. His nascent body chose that very moment to betray him. A foul stench reached his nose, nestled within his swaddling clothes. His face burned red with embarrassment. Ah, I pooped. All right, as soon as he gained proper control of his new body, he'd start training. Already, the bare bones of a workout regiment were beginning to form in the back of his brain. His skills were limited to only a few jutsu and this odd, newfound power stirring within. He needed to expand his repertoire and quickly master as many techniques as possible, eliminate any and all weaknesses within him. He had to grow strong and fast. He needed to keep them safe. He must to protect them, even from themselves if need be. That settled it. He would be loyal to them both, if nothing else, a good son. In the years to come, he would remember that promise. At the end of the day, he was just that. A loyal son. Magic was power. Power is perspective. Perspective became truth. In the fullness of time. Extra emphasis on time there. Loads of time. Lots. Much to Naruto's eternal chagrin, his newborn body proved to be something of a prison at first. Of course it did. He'd just been reborn after all. As such, his bodily functions remained beyond his control for quite some time, just say nothing of his limbs. breastfeeding, possessing no motor control of your own limbs or voice, and having your diaper changed are a personal hell to begin with. There's a reason the human mind doesn't remember that. But as a babe bearing the mind of a young man, he was painfully aware of every instance, every indignity, everything that wounded his already mangled pride. It was galling, really, almost made him never want to be reborn again, if only to avoid being this damnably weak. Mercifully, he was distracted by his newfound parents at almost every turn and in return took infinite amusement in riling them up wherever he could. Honestly, he could tell they were inexperienced at this, if only for the sheer amount of attention they lavished upon him in the day-to-day. In conclusion, they spoiled him rotten. Not just in their words and deeds, but the very place where they dwelt. He didn't realize that little tidbit until his parents unveiled him to what Mom dubbed the common folk. Mildly concerning, that, her causal disparagement of normal people, but still. He lived in a castle. An actual honest-to-goodness castle. Like the sort he'd read of in storybooks. Mind you, he didn't necessarily enjoy being fawned over by so many people as a baby, but at least their hearts seemed to be in the right place. Mostly. He noted those who held ill intent toward his parents, but more importantly those who possessed malice in their hearts and were prepared to act on it. He filed their faces away for potential retribution at a later date. Once he returned to the castle, his life gradually began to pick up steam, slowly at first, but like a moving train. Yes, his world actually had those. He remembered the land of snow, thank you very much, and he found himself paying more and more attention, both to his surroundings and those in them. Ozma made funny faces for him, and he deigned to smile and laugh at his poor attempts at humor. More dutifully he listened as his fellow reincarnatee taught him the language of the world, both how to read it and speak it. He was no Minato, to be sure, no one could ever be, but he tried to be a good dad. Really, he did. Most first parents would have despaired and left him a nanny to mind him, yet Ozma did not. For that alone he gained a fair deal of favor from him. Salem proved decidedly less restrained in her initial attempts at motherhood. She carried him wherever she went, wanted to show him everything, everyone, everywhere all at once. It was dizzying. Moreover, she showed him her spells, a craft she had spent an eternity cultivating, and while she'd admittedly let it fall stagnant for a while, she was all too happy to revive said craft and teach him when he showed signs of the spark, as it were. The spells she knew. So many ideas. He loved sitting in the garden with her and bantering back and forth with new ideas. She was also delighted to tell him the glory of the Grimm, and promised to one day introduce him to her dark brood when he came of age. Dad wasn't too happy about that. Fooey on him. Monsters that listened to him? Creatures at his beck and call? Beasts that did his bidding? Yes, please. Father Ozma sought to steer him the opposite direction, telling him stories of grand chivalry, when the world was young and new. His tales were tinged with nostalgia, his worldview hopeful of what the world should be, not as it was. Mother meanwhile showed him what the world had become, the lawless lands bereft of their guidance, and why it was their duty to bring order to it, no matter the cost. Soon enough, he began to notice a prevailing theme between his parents. Ozma was preoccupied with the past. Salem was fixated on future. And he, Nero, was stuck somewhere in the middle. He became the bridge between them. His wants and needs were few, nearly singular even. Bodily functions and moral quandaries aside, Naruto gradually began to settle into his second childhood alongside his second name, if only because he never truly got to experience a proper life the first time around. Forgive him for being a little greedy. He wanted for nothing but didn't crave everything. He wasn't that much of a glutton, not at all. No, he wanted just as much as he could hold on to and keep. As time passed and he took his first tentative steps literally, so too did he begin to appreciate the wide wonders of the world. All the while, his body threatened to stymie him at every turn. As his first year came and went with no escape from this torment in sight, he was naturally quite upset. By the second, he'd regained control of both his arms and legs and so only simmered. Come the third, he mastered his tongue. When the fourth rolled round, he finally achieved proper mastery over his physical form such as it were, and while it wasn't quite up to the standards of his first body yet, he had other matters to occupy him and forestall his frustrations. For that moment on, he began learning, absorbing any and all information like a sponge. Knowledge was power, and he used it to intently survey his surroundings, learning all he could. And in time, his observations paid dividends. This world was known as Remnant. Once home to the brother gods who had long since departed to parts unknown, supposedly taking the gift of magic with them while wiping out humanity the first time around, it was now very much a broken world, rife with chaos and disorder, a mere shadow of its former glory. Hence the term. In time, humanity evolved and emerged from the primordial ooze once more, but those who walked the land these days were likewise reduced, lacking the gift of magic to protect themselves. As such, they were easy prey to Grimm and, more often, one another. Stranger still, there were other humanoid beings who hadn't existed prior to the last extinction event, a strange breed of humanity bearing animal traits. More often than not, they were stronger than the humans, faster, with sharper hearing and better vision besides. These, he soon learned, were the Faunus. Gifts aside, they weren't all that different from humanity. Yet despite their gifts, they were ostracized and persecuted by said humans, kept in cages, driven to the very fringes of society. Why? He asked Mom once, unable to find the answer to such a quagmire. Salem's response alarmed him. Humanity fears that which they cannot control, my son. And what they cannot control, they destroy. In that way, they were no different than the god of darkness, weren't they? He knew what it was to be shunned for a problem not of his own making. Another thing for him to fix, once he came into his own. Matters of the world aside, there was another, far more fascinating subject that drew his eyes. Magic. As one of only 3 practitioners on Remnant capable of controlling the latter, suffice to say, he had an interesting childhood. Magic was power, such was worth repeating, and he was no stranger to power. Naruto, or Nero as he was now called, took to it like a fish to water. He wasn't content to go with the flow. He swam upstream every chance he could, constantly testing himself, pushing his limits, see exactly what he was capable of. The basic elements were simple enough to understand in principle. Thanks to his time as a shinobi, he already possessed an intrinsic understanding that allowed him to utilize them easily enough. Water, earth, fire, air. The 4 elements lived together in harmony, sustaining one another. Water fed earth, earth fed fire, which spread further with air. Likewise, water held an advantage against fire, but in turn the earth element triumphed over water. Wind fed fire given half a chance, but wind and water together could create storms, which in turn allowed one to step into the realm of gods, that is to say, lightning and thunder. It made sense the more you practiced. And he did so love using lightning to smite fools. Everything changed when one introduced light and dark magic into the equation. He struggled with those, admittedly. It wasn't a simple matter of yin and yang jutsu, for just as lightning and thunder allowed one to step into the realm of the gods, light and dark were their true essence. The brother gods had abandoned Remnant long ago, but pieces of them yet remained. Take their shrines, for instance. Those remained, long after their masters left untouched by humanity. The pools of darkness. The lake of light. Places of power. For crying out loud, the god of darkness had shattered the moon with his own body, pieces of which had come tumbling down to earth in the form of meteors. It wasn't hard to find a few of those and drag them back to the castle for further study. Because, much like their masters and unlike the others' godless elements, light and dark magic were a breed apart, They were alive. They wanted to be used. You could heal with light magic, conjure mighty barriers, weave your very thoughts into being. Dark magic, however, veered in a dangerous direction. Annihilation, breaking, cruelty, decay, erasure, falsehoods. It was not a gentle magic like light, but rather a hungry one instead, offering endless applications, each eager to consume its user. With proper mastery, one could craft powerful illusions, control the minds of others, even use it to raise the dead. Not in the true sense of the word, more a horrific facsimile of such. Necromancy. He tried it once on the castle's cat, an old thing that had passed away in its sleep. The results were alarming. Appalled by his discovery, he quietly put a pin in that subject, destroyed his research and focused on other studies. Curiosity was all well and good in measured amounts, but too much tended toward obsession. He'd seen where that had led once before and had no intention of repeating it. He would not become another Orochimaru. Thankfully, there were other subsets to study, other divergences of magic and the elements. With them came so many more divergent branches of magic. He diligently studied them wherever he found them, experimenting with his chakra and magic alike, nearly to the exclusion of everything else. If this world were a certain video game, it would have been akin to throwing nearly all his points into intelligence and faith. And why shouldn't he? He already had plenty of strength and dexterity besides, and his vitality remained potent as ever, while his tutelage under his newfound parents ensured that his once blunt mind was sharpened to a razor's edge. By contrast, maxing out his mana wasn't all that hard. It grew the more he used it, and when one factored chakra and his signature shadow cones into the equation, he began using it an awful lot. By the time his 5th birthday rolled around, the palace staff had begun referring to him as young master not just for his station, but his insistence upon mastering every field of magic. Easier said than done, that. Wind and light came easily to him, no doubt due to his past life, but he oftentimes found himself struggling with others. Study was all well and good, but he longed to use magic. Truly, actively, to improve the lives of others. Help people, you know? Alas, his parents were reluctant to let him leave the castle unsupervised. He could see why. Ozma Dad had only been reborn once, whereas Salem had lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They had a right to be cautious, he supposed. He was their only child, and as much as he might wish otherwise, their immortality didn't extend to him. Which meant protections. Not just often, but always. Every hour of the day. Call them bodyguards, nannies, assassins, whatever. It didn't change what they were. Vexing. Salem was the eternal queen, and Ozma, the immortal king. What did that make him, then? Their silver son? He hadn't had a chance to truly test his patented talk no jutsu on anyone just yet. He laughed a little just thinking about it. That said, as the firstborn son in the New World Order, was also a prince, and there were certain duties have expected of him. Magic was all well and good, but apparently he was expected to learn what it meant to rule as well, not simply the governance, but how to command armies, lead men, and inspire confidence. These duties he devoured happily and demanded more of, much to the surprise of his parents, if only because no one had ever taught him how to properly lead during his first life. He could have avoided so many problems, saved so many more lives, as Naruto, if he just had a little more charisma. So he learned, he studied, and he behaved for the most part. And then, on his 6th birthday, everything changed. Their son was a master of magic. Salem had never been more proud. Ozma had never been more concerned. And from that disagreement, the balance shifted. But for better or worse, who could say? Salem stood before her son's bed in the dead of night, watching him sleep. Waning moonlight spilled in from the window, casting her only child in an ethereal glow, as though the slightest movement might shatter him. She knew better, of course. Nero had proven himself an able prodigy, blessed with a keen mind and several skills besides. He was not frail by any means or measure. Yet when looked upon her child she feared for him, not what he might become, mind you, but rather what would happen to him in the coming years. He was her boy. Her only boy. Her only child. More might yet come and hopefully would, because she desired daughters, in the fullness of time, but for now he remained her only child. The thought of something happened to him was more than she could bear. A pale hand curled against her chest, gray fingers digging into the fabric of her cloak. The brother gods had left remnant behind long ago, but their foul curse was everlasting. She would never die. Nor would Ozma, for that matter. When his current body expired, his soul would simply move on to yet another host and find her again, as he had before. Their son was not so fortunate. Someday, he would perish. The thought filled her with panic. The thought pained her. Ozma would have young Neo remain just as he was, young and naive, ignorant of the gods and the danger their return posed. Her dear husband would have him be blind when he could see, vulnerable when he could be protected, walk when he could fly. So she must take matters into her own two hands. Ozma would be angry, furious, even livid. But he would understand in time. All she did for love. There were no limits to that love. She would do terrible things for those she loved. Such was why it was called love, after all. You didn't love your children half-heartedly, or when it suited you. You loved them forever and always, and as such, you'd do anything to keep them safe. Which was why she was doing this. It was for Nero's own good. He'd thank her for it. Creeping closer, she reached out and took a hold of her son's shoulder, jostling him gently. "Awaken, my son." His eyes snapped open instantly, bright and sharp. To his credit, he didn't panic. He was confused for all of a moment before he sat up, yawned once, and scratched the back of his head. "Mom? What are you?" "Shh." She pressed a finger to his lips. "Keep your voice down. We must be quiet." A pale brow rose. "Quiet for what?" "Don your cloak, son." "Don your cloak, son." Naruto scrubbed sleep from his eyes and squinted at Salem, this woman he'd come to call mother. Second mother, technically. Kushina Mom would always be his first mother, and nothing could change that. Still, was it normal for a mother to wake their son in the dead of the night, demand their silence, and make them dress for a journey? Probably not, in all likelihood. He could have questioned her, but he found himself intrigued. Why was she here? Why all the secrecy? Curious. Was she trying to sneak him out of the castle? She and Dad had been arguing as of late, but surely things weren't that bad. They couldn't be. Not yet. He refused to let them have a falling out. That mustn't happen. No, it wouldn't happen. Not to his new family. He would not allow it. "Where are we going?" "Not far." Salem soothed him, holding his hand tight as she led him deeper into the darkness. "We will return before dawn." That, at least, was comforting, if only because it meant she didn't intend to run away with him. But where, then, was she taking him? What about Dad? Her fingers tightened around his. He needn't know of this just yet. Ah, clandestine operations. How he missed them from his shinobi days. Good times. "Do you trust me, son?" He laughed, mildly incredulous. "What?" Salem glared down at him fiercely, red eyes glowing in the gloom. "Do you trust me?" Something told him she wouldn't take kindly to anything answer save yes. "I do." Good. She released a breath he hadn't realized she was holding. Whatever you do, don't let go of my hand, not until I say so. Salem hastened her pace, her long stride forcing him to jog a little blasted body, just to keep up. In nearly no time at all she led him out one of the castle's many secret passages and out into the night. What a sigh. Stars sprawled overhead, framed in the light of the shattered moon high above, visible for miles in every direction, a landscape wholly untouched by mankind. It really was a lovely night for a journey. Salem scooped him into her arms, suddenly, startling him. Hey! Fly! She muttered under her breath. That was her only warning before a blue glow engulfed her body. She shot upright, hauling him with her. Now he understood why she'd insisted on holding his hand, and why she'd decided to hold him at the last instant instead. Wouldn't do to drop him, after all. But never mind that. Naruto's face lit up, because there was a spell he hadn't thought of. How did she do it? Was it difficult? He wanted to learn. Salem noticed his eager expression and favored him with an indulgent smile. Curious? Naruto found himself nodded eagerly, betrayed by his own curiosity. She kissed his forehead. I'll teach you then. He snuggled against her. That's a promise. In short order, she brought him some distance from the castle to the edge of the mountains nearby, where the mouth of a large cavern awaited them. He got an odd feeling from it. Not bad, not good, just odd. His superior senses told him something was down there, but it didn't feel hostile. Just inert, for lack of a better term. Salem landed and ushered him inside. From there it was a long journey to the caverns below, a dark and dank place that smelled faintly of blood and broken bones. Dark dust crystals of vicious violet jutted from the floor and ceiling, illuminating the area within, casting a dim radiance upon the walls. Down she led him, deeper into the bowels of the earth. He ducked under a crystal sprouting from the wall. Where are we? Somewhere your father doesn't know of. Salem threaded her way over another such spire. Left unspoken was both the plea and warning. Don't tell him of this. He didn't intend to. Without warning, Mother came to a sudden stop before him, pausing in a large open space lit by the towering dust deposits. We've arrived, she hummed. And just in time, it seems. Red eyes glared at them from the dark. Grim. Oh, that was her game. So many. Grim. He couldn't hope to count them all, even he would be pressed to fight that many in his current state. Salem nudged him forward. Don't be afraid. They won't harm you, I shan't allow it. Easy for her to say. He was still squishy. He might die. Sure, he could crush a good number of these with ease, but not Al. There was still that instinctive urge to panic and flee. These were old, grim, ancient even. Any commands given to these would be issued to the lesser ranks below them. The fact that she'd brought him here, now, in the dead of night to meet those monsters, face these titans, could only mean one thing. They must see you. His mother intoned behind him. Know your scent. Hear your voice. Do not hesitate. Show no mercy. You must make them fear you. And Ursa plodded forward on all fours, beady eyes glaring. It roared at him. Heh. Cute. Kurama was 10 times louder than this fuzzball. Naruto snarled back, eyes blazing red, channeling very bit of latent authority he possessed. Kneel. It slumped with a whimper, shaking the ground underfoot. Huh. Was it that easy? Maybe he should try again. Arise. It sprang to its feet, tongue lolling out. That's better. He knelt and scratched between its ears. Who's a good boy? It rumbled happily. Salem sighed softly, a noise on the verge of a bemused laugh. That's one way to do it, I suppose, When he looked to her for further approval, she granted him a nod. You are their prince now, they will know and obey your commands. You have but to speak, and they will follow your will, as they do mine. She held out her hand, and he placed his palms in hers without hesitation. In return, she drew a knife from the folds of her robe and cut his palm. Ow! Naruto hissed in pain as blood welled forth, dripping down to pool upon into the ground, but made no effort to reclaim his hand, trusting this madness had some purpose to it. His faith paid off in spades. You need only cut your hand to summon Grim from your blood as I do, Salem instructed, still making him hold his hand aloft as his wound clotted and closed, the last red drop darkening into inky blackness upon the floor. It is a skill that will take time to master, one that you mustn't show to the common folk, for they are a fearful and superstitious lot and would surely persecute you for it. Do you understand? He nodded once. Good. She granted him a nod, released his hand, and looked to the puddle of blood. Now try to summon a Grim. From his blood? Nonsense, surely. Wasn't it? And yet hadn't he done something similar using summoning jutsu? With blood as a catalyst? Moreover, when he focused upon the puddle, there was something there. Power left behind in his blood. A sensation. A presence. It felt as though he had but to push with his mind, will it so and... An idle thought occurred to him. He'd apricate something useful, a bird perhaps. Caw! Almost immediately a juvenile nevermore burst from the puddle of his blood, squawking indignantly, wings flapping as it settled itself upon the fractured floor. Its small head craned this way and that, as though looking for something, no, perhaps for someone. It saw him. With a triumphant squawk, it spread its still damp wings, took flight, and launched itself at him like an arrow. He thrust out an arm to intercept it without thinking, and almost immediately, the bird alighted upon his limb, talons digging into his sleeve. It regarded him docilely, head craning to regard him with curious intent. Wow! He scratched the bird's feather, quietly impressed when it preened under his touch. An admirable attempt. Salem kissed his forehead. And on your first try, no less. I'd expect nothing less of my son. Now, Nero, to the rest. Rest? Gah! Naruto grunted as a rather large beowulf crowded in, practically thrusting its muzzle in his face to get at him. All right. You're a friendly fellow. He spent the better part of 3 hours being introduced to all manner of Elder Grimm, many of whom were very interesting indeed. He took his time to memorize them, as they doubtlessly did him. He hadn't realized there were quite so many of them in existence. Some of them were kinda cute. Seconds became minutes, and minutes bled into hours. It would prove to be a long evening. Long indeed. Ozma was waiting for them at the secret passage when they returned. The poor man looked absolutely livid, arms crossed before his chest, the light of the rising sun gleaming in his white hair, his silver-gray eyes steel and stern. He met them halfway with crisp steps, clutching his staff in one hand, the other curled into a tight fist at his side. No sooner did he reach them, than he thrust out his weapon to bar their path. What have you done? Salem sniffed, and held her head high as she approached. What was necessary? She reached out, took a hold of his staff, and forced it down. Our darling Nero need never fear the Grim. He will be safe. Dad hissed out an agonized breath, as though the very words pained him. Don't say that where others will hear you. Mom frowned, baffled by his fear. Why ever not? I am queen of the Grim. Now he is their prince. Did you make him drink? Salem blinked, confused. I beg you pardon? The pools of darkness. The wizard all but shouted. Did he drink from them? Submerge himself in theme? Her gaze narrowed, first in confusion, then scorn. Why ever would he need to? He carries my blood within him, as you well know. poisoning him in the pools is pointless. There's no need for it. Ozma took her by the hand and drew her inside, cutting her off. We will speak more of this later. Alone. He cast a fretful glance over his shoulder at him. Was that fear in his eyes? Nonsense. What manner of father feared their son? Besides, he hadn't done anything wrong. The Grimm would just be another useful tool in his arsenal. He was hardly about to use them to conquer the world now, was he? In a way, it was akin to having his own summoned animals, back in the elemental nations. Who could possibly be afraid of that? Dad grimaced suddenly and glanced his way, catching his attention. I'm sorry, son, but would mind giving me and your mother some privacy? Naruto rolled his eyes and walked ahead of them, hands clasped behind his back. Fian. He never did figure out Ozma's concern until years later. By then it was already too late. Magic wasn't the same as chakra. Some could argue it was even better, one might say superior. Of course, one could also be wrong, but one's arguments stemmed from that point. For you see, Naruto knew what chakra was, even understood it for the most part. He was by no means so arrogant as to think himself a master of it, but he possessed a better grasp of it than most. He'd become a sage in his last life, for crying out loud, been blessed by Hagoromo's power, very nearly ascended into the realm of gods. So yes, chakra. He grasped the concept. Magic, however? Not so. He wasn't even 10 in this strange second life of his, and already he'd discovered nearly limitless applications, bound only by the limits of his imagination. And he could imagine a lot. After all, he was nothing if not curious. But curiosity had a tendency to come back and bite you if you weren't careful. Dad had said as much to him once. Curiosity has ever been the bane of both man and woman alike. Take care you aren't consumed by yours, son. For that way lays madness. Naruto learned that lesson the hard way one day, when he accidentally immolated a tree and blew up a mountain. Yes. In that order. He had a perfectly good reason for that last part, honest. To be fair, he hadn't exactly been trying to make the bark spontaneously combust, quite the contrary. He wanted the opposite. He was trying to accelerate the growth of a rather magnificent oak in the castle garden, find a way to breathe fresh life into the soil. But in doing so, he pushed too hard, too fast. It went about as expected. The result? Fire. Worse, it was the dry season, and as such the flames spread all too quickly, consuming the tree and threatening to spread into the rest of the garden. So he did what any magically inclined boy would do. He panicked, used earth magic to uproot it, inverted gravity, and launched it into a nearby mountain at Mach 10 in a desperate attempt to hide the evidence of his wrongdoing. Said mountain exploded. Naruto blinked. Hard. Did I just create a nuke? Surely not. It couldn't be that simple. Kurama had explained the principle to him, once. Felt like a lifetime ago, you know? And while he remembered the basics, this shouldn't be possible. The ever-growing mushroom cloud in the distance said otherwise, however. Apparently when you threw something hard enough and fast enough, you created quite the explosion. Also an avalanche, by the look of it. Lesson learned. Hopefully nobody lived on that mountain. If anything did, well, nothing would be anymore. Looking left, then right, he found no witnesses in sight. Good. One of the maids or the guards would run straight to his parents. Then again, that might be funny, if only to see the reactions on their faces. Perhaps that was petty of him. But having no real friends to speak of, funny how some things didn't change, no matter the lifetime, and only his magic to entertain himself outside of lessons, he'd begun to grow restless. It couldn't be helped. He had to restrain himself. It was for his own good as well as theirs, really. After all, it wouldn't do for the castle staff to see him frolicking with Grimm, now would it? Still, All was well as long as Mom and Dad didn't find out about his little experiment. And what, pray tell? A familiar voice drawled from a nearby balcony behind him with fond exasperation. Were you hoping to accomplish with that explosion? Busted. Naruto gulped, clasped both hands behind his back, and refused to so much as glance at the speaker. Maybe if I don't look, they'll go away, said speaker coughed pointedly. Nero, I know you heard me. No, no, no. I heard nothing. Do make eye contact. Now, young man. We raised you better than that. Had they? Had they really? Don't make me come down there, son. Ah, crap baskets. There was no getting out of this one, was there? Accepting the futility of his endeavor, the reborn shinobi straightened up and reluctantly pivoted to face his reckoning. Sure enough, when he looked up, he found his father in all his finery staring down at him, scepter in hand. Ozma did not look amused. Not entirely angry either, but definitely not pleased. Well? A pale brow quirked. What remnant were you attempting this time? Naruto hung his head, chagrined. Wood-style magic. Ozma's brow rose to join his hairline. By destroying a mountain. But I was. The words escaped him in a rare, almost petulant whine. Honest. Madara, Hashirama, even Yamato-sensei, they all made it look so damnably easy, downright effortless, even. He understood the application behind it, of course, and in theory it should be simple insofar as natural chakra was concerned, therefore magic ought to be just as simple. Combine water and earth elements, throw in a spark, then you were good to go, right? Wrong. Immolating a tree had been his latest failure, and while he had learned something new as a result, it was still a far cry from what he sought. Perhaps sensing his mood, Ozma shook his head and abandoned his lofty perch with a long-suffering sigh, utilizing a pulse of green magic to descend it unto Naruto's level. The latter fought down the urge to snort at the blatant showmanship. Flight magic wasn't that impressive. Useful, yeah, but nothing fancy. He mastered that last year. The real trick was learning to fly and sling spells down at your enemies, raining fire from above. Thump. His train of thought found itself spectacularly derailed as Ozma gently tapped his head with his emerald-tipped staff. Please tell me that explosion wasn't intentional, son. Naruto laughed nervously, rubbing his skull. It wasn't. Nero. Ozma's tone promptly wiped the smile from his face, forcing a chagrined smile from him. To be fair, I really didn't think it would explode. So you say. His lord father tapped his staff down with a fond sigh. You're going to be an absolute menace today, aren't you? Naruto promptly clasped both hands behind his back again, looked away, and began whistling innocently. Father sighed. Whistling will avail you not, young man. The whistling intensified. You do realize you've likely frightened the peasants down in town. Irk. Naruto bit his tongue with a strangled noise, abruptly reminded of the farms and fields that had sprung up in the shadow of the castle. Would that explosive avalanche follow the harvest? Hopefully not, unless all that ash from the blast got into the air and messed with the weather weight. Was Ozma trying to make him feel extra guilty or something? His second father had a rather persuasive way of speaking when he wanted something. If he had a silver tongue as Nero, his old man's was probably gold, if such a thing were possible. Ozma Dad could be terribly persuasive when he wanted to be, and only he and Mom were immune to his charms. Well, he was most of the time. Still, he couldn't deny Dad had a point, but for one thing. Don't call them that, old man. Ozma blinked, momentarily nonplussed. Beg pardon? Call who what, now? They're not peasants. Naruto planted his feet, crossed both arms before his chest, and fixed his father with a decidedly mulish look. Their people. Here at last, the elder wizard flinched, shoulders slumping in silent shame. Ah. My apologies. That was unkind. Naruto bit his tongue to stifle the instinctively acidic retort that threatened to burst forth from his lips. Dad was right. That had been unkind, and the fact that he, like Salem, often failed to realize such simple things was, well, somewhat concerning. Still, everything was fine. He was here to keep his parents on the right path. Even if he still wasn't entirely certain what said path was. What was good in this world? What was evil? He was still searching for the answer, hadn't found it yet. "'S fine." He shrugged a shoulder instead, content to have gained his point. "No," Ozma knelt before him and laid a hand on his shoulder. "It most assuredly is not. Your mother and I were not always as we are now. There was a time when we were mortal as any other. I often find myself forgetting those halcyon days." Naruto's right ear twitched, betraying his intrigue. Ozma and Salem seldom spoke of the past. He knew they both couldn't die, Mom in the literal sense and Ozma in the less conventional, but he never quite discerned how. Salem said it was a curse on her part, while Ozma insisted it was a gift, yet whenever asked, either elaborated. He was curious. He wanted to know. Judging by the pained look on his father's face, probably best not to pry for now. "If you feel that I am making a mistake," Ozma continued on, undaunted, "feel free to correct me. Likewise, I shall do the same for you. Does that sound fair?" Naruto saw an opening to another question he'd been meaning to ask and pounced. "Like the Grimm?" His father flinched and released him, giving Naruto a chance to press the advantage. So he did, staring him down. "You don't approve of me bonding with them. Why?" Ozma hung his head with a sigh. "You are far too clever for your age. Has anyone ever told you that?" "You have, just now. Still haven't answered my question, though." Ozma pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's not that I don't approve, son. Your mother means well, but sometimes she can be a bit heavy-handed in how she goes about things. I know she had no ill intent in what she did that night, yet in doing so, she failed to consider the consequences. Should you be seen with a tamed Grimm, the people will raise questions. Dangerous questions, ones we aren't prepared to answer." Naruto made a face, displeased by the answer. "So it's fear, then?" "Just like his last life." "How incredibly." "No!" Ozma saw his expression and discarded his staff to wrap him in a warm embrace, chin coming down over his shoulder to hold him fast. "Not fear. I'm not afraid of you, son, nor will I ever be. Never doubt that. I'm merely concerned for the future. Listen to me." Leaning back, he stared him in the eye, desperately trying to impart the proper meaning behind his words. "This world, this remnant, is but a fledgling and in dire need of protection. Never forget that. We are its guardians, thus it falls to us to protect the people, to lead them, guide them. Conquer them?" Sure enough, father flicked his forehead. "Must you be difficult?" Naruto shrugged a shoulder again. "I'm just saying. Sometimes you gotta stomp down the bad guys." "I do not disagree, but you could stand to phrase it better." Tempting and fun, though it was to simply focus all his energies into destructive applications, he knew doing so would give Dad more white hairs than he already had. Wait, wasn't his hair completely gone white already and all? Meh, not his problem then. Ozma laid a hand on his head and ruffled his hair. "You truly are your mother's son." Naruto batted his hand aside to squint up at him. "Speaking of Mom, any idea when she'll be back?" Ozma tooted. "Not for some time, I'd wager. You should be thankful she isn't here to scold you for that disaster of yours." Scold him? Salem would probably praise him for developing a spell like that. She'd been over the moon when he learned how to fly on his own. Dang, now he missed her even more. Really, he knew he shouldn't be worried about Salem, but he just couldn't help himself. She'd gone through a rather noisy argument with Dad just last week, and they were each of them taking time to cool off. Now she was ostensibly turning the northern kingdoms for any signs of lingering magic, though he knew the real reason. It was concerning how they'd begun arguing more often. Best keep an eye on them. Besides, it wasn't as though she was in danger of anything beyond boredom with her immortality, yet her absence still left his mind ill at ease. Maybe another sibling would help. He rather liked that idea. Liked it a lot, really. He'd already gotten his fill of what it felt like to have a younger brother, thank you Konohamaru, and the idea of having several sisters running around just sounded, well, right, you know? Like it was meant to be. Destiny. Maybe then this giant dark castle wouldn't feel quite so lonely. A grin split his whiskered cheeks. Hey, Pops. Ozma turned a concerned look upon him. Yes. Naruto brought his best pleading look to bear upon his father, and mustered teary eyes. Can I have a few sisters? Ozma's tan face flushed red. How many is a few? I dunno. Naruto made a show of counting on his fingers, though he'd already settled upon a number himself. 4 sounds like a nice number. Salem's head snapped up. Somewhere, somehow, she knew it. Her baby boy finally wanted siblings. Happy day. Call it a mother's sixth sense, instinct, or a subconscious spell, didn't matter. She knew. A mother always knew. Nero was nearly 10 now, and already he seemed to possess the keen mind of someone twice his age. He was growing up, and growing alone, with no friends worthy of his station. A few more little ones wouldn't be remiss, surely. Why, he might even act his age again. It might calm Ozma down as well and put those silly fears of his to rest. The gods were gone. They were never coming back. To think otherwise was folly. A low growl underfoot reminded her of where she was. Oops. Not her fault. She'd meant to go north, but direction was so confusing, she'd wound up going east instead. Oh dear. I'd nearly forgotten about you. Bemused, she gazed down at the broken bandit kings still trapped beneath her heel. Branwen, was it? Idly grinding her foot into his spine, she leaned down, seized a fistful of his dark hair and fixed him with a stern look. Today's your lucky day. I'm in a rather good mood. I'll let you and your so-called tribe live, provided you swear eternal fealty to me. The man squinted up at her with red eyes and gurgled wetly in what might have been an affirmation. Not good enough. Salem dug her heel in. I took your leg, not your tongue. Speak up. Understood, my queen. Salem released him. Good boy. Pleased with herself, she sauntered away, hips swaying. Little did she know that her actions here today would spark a fear that would span generations. Somewhere leagues in the distance, Naruto could have sworn he heard a giddy squeal. Yup, that certainly settled it. Moms were scary. Hearing it as well, Ozma pivoted, knelt to retrieve his fallen staff with the sigh of a doomed man. Come, let us soothe the hearts and minds of our people from your little incident, preferably before your mother returns and pins me to the bed. The meaning of that last bit sailed right over Naruto's head. He was far more focused on the first part. I get to leave the castle? Under my supervision, his father chided him. Take care not to wander off. Are we gonna use teleportation? Ozma tooted. We will walk. Naruto dug his heels in. Silence reigned. Ozma sighed. Don't tell your mother. The town at the base of the castle didn't have a name. It was simply the town. Might want to work on that, Naruto decided. Come to think of it, did their kingdom even have a name? He'd never really thought to ask his parents. Note to self, ask about that one, too. That said, the town was barely a town at all, more of a village really, and a shoddy one at that. Past the castle gate, the emerald road gave way to stone, then dirt, leading into a ramshackle series of homes built of wood and thatch. Primitive, that was the word. He found himself pitying them despite his best efforts not to. A small crowd had gathered at the foot of the slope leading to the castle to meet them, and it was there that he realized the people of the town were worse off than he thought. They looked tired, hungry, and worn. Even their clothes were plain humans and faunus alike, with nearly no difference between their attire. Each mingled freely among one another at least, so he took some pride in that. Maybe there was hope for them, yet. Still, they were looking to them for answers, but none of them dared to utter a word. Why was that, he wondered. More questions to ask later. Ahem. Ozma coughed into a fist for silence, momentarily at a loss for words, then rallied. Greetings, my subjects. He raised his emerald scepter high with a fiery flare of green magic, commanding their attention. There is no cause for alarm. All is well. Your prince, my son, he gestured magnanimously to a startled Naruto, fought a mighty grim dragon that dwelt within the mountain high above you and slew it before it could do you harm. He destroyed the peak to bring an end to it, and its mighty brood. A murmur of excitement passed through them, women and children alike, as they looked amongst one another. They didn't even ask about the crops. Did they not know the danger? Shame darkened his cheeks. Furthermore, Dad was hitting his stride now and taking a chance to be kind where Salem would have been stern. In honor of this most auspicious day, there shan't be any taxes on this year's harvest, nor the next. That got their attention. Everyone hated taxes, peasant and king alike. Unbidden, he found himself listening with half an ear as the people babbled happily. Did you hear that? An old woman tittered. He saved us. Hers was the pebble that started the avalanche. The crowd surged forward, grasping hands, prying at him. Hail to the king! Hail to the one! Kneel to the crown! In short order and under Ozma's watchful gaze, he found himself being touched and poked and prodded by a great many hands, all but embraced by admiring townsfolk. Stop that! Naruto covered his face to hide his flush, fingers brushing against the infernal diadem he wore. The metal did little to cool his temper. Stop bowing. The townsfolk didn't listen, naturally. While some were eager to embrace him, others all but prostrated themselves before him. He couldn't even be angry. These people lived in daily fear of the grim. For all they knew, Ozma's tall tale was truth, and didn't that shame him all the more? As he searched for an escape, his gaze alighted upon a young girl bearing a pale complexion, white hair and bright blue eyes, wrapped in a pale linen dress. Her ears were strangely pointed. Was she a faunus of some sort, he wondered? She smiled shyly at him. In that smile, he found an escape and an idea all at once. Sorry to throw you under the bus, miss. You there! He cast out with a raised, imperious voice, and pointed her way, momentarily shocking the crowd into silence. Come here for a second, will ya? She jolted, surprised, and the townsfolk drew back, following his finger. The girl looked about, startled by his sudden demand, but didn't deny him. She approached, wringing her hands anxiously. He winced, taking pity on her. What's your name? Shni, my lord. She bowed her head low, nearly bringing her face horizontal with the ground. Shni Razor. Ah, cripes. Now he just felt like some kinda jerk, you know? He really hated putting on airs like this, but... I have need of a new maid back in the castle, he said curtly, hating himself for the ruse. A murmur of quiet awe passed through the crowd, but none dared object to his words. At length, the girl accepted, bowing her head low. As you say, young master. Behind him, Ozma made an amused noise. Your mother will be delighted. Naruto dragged a hand down his face, hoping he'd made a good choice. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The bow was heavy in Naruto's hands. Planting his feet in the castle courtyard, he grunted thoughtfully and hefted it in both hands, idly strengthening his stance as he adjusted his grip on his latest treasured tool. Thankfully, this one didn't buck or break in his hands like the last 8. The weight, while stolid, remained balanced as he took aim at the sky. Only natural, really. He'd constructed the weapon as such for that very purpose. It was a large wrought iron creation, slender, yet nearly as large as he was tall. That was saying something, given his age. At nearly 9 years of age now, he'd grown rather tall and was well on his way to mastering his magic, as well as the things he created with said magic. Still, that didn't preclude him from making works of art with said magic. Forged in a manner hereto unknown to anyone but him and burnished with a special string that would slice through the fingers of anyone found unworthy, it was a tool like any other, albeit one that would only ever respond to his whims. After all, what was the point in having a weapon that anyone could use? Answer: there was none. He was hardly out to make weapons of war, mind you, but rather tools of the trade, for now said tools were safest in his hands, and his hands alone. Besides, a bow suited him just fine given his age. He couldn't properly wield a sword and shield just yet given his lack of muscle, let alone an axe or polearm. Maybe a mace if he braved the darn thing with both hands, but a halberd, scythe, or whip were wholly out of the question. In that regard, a bow was an equitable compromise, far better than a staff or a rapier, though he professed to have some skill in both thanks to Shni. Say what you would about the elf girl, but Razor Shni was a deft hand with the latter these days. Speedy, sneaky Shni. Stick end with the pointy end was all well and good, yet unlike her, he wasn't about to let his enemies get close. He'd made that mistake in his last life, constantly throwing himself into close combat, not because he had to, but rather because it was all he knew. He'd become something of a brawler, and by the time he finally developed a proper ranged arsenal in the form of his Raisin Shuriken, truth-seeking orbs and Baijidamamis Ukarama, he already had too many bad habits ingrained in him to use them when he should. He'd paid the price for that. Died because of it. Ergo. Testing the string, he took a step further forward into the courtyard and considered the sky before him, sunny and bright, with only a single stray cloud to mar today's perfection. For lack of any other visible foe, he made that cloud his target. He'd learned from his mistake last time. This time there would be no such error. Come on, it wasn't as though anyone would miss a cloud now, would they? From there, he inhaled deeply and drew it back, squinting against the afternoon sun. Just to be safe, he made certain to aim high and well away from the castle, placing the farming fields at his back rather than directly in his path. It had been a proper pain using weather magic to get rid of all that ash in the air, and he was in no hurry to revisit his incident, lest he get another telling off from Dad. Mumbling under his breath, he drew the string further back, visualizing the arrow he wanted to create in his mind's eye. A brisk breath of steam fled from his lips as he exhaled, eyes gleaming gold. I am the bone of my sword. Incantations, that is to say the art of crafting a spell and strengthening its existence in this world with words, worked wonderfully. Ah, alliteration, thy name is not Naruto. Or Nero, as he went in this life. It was a deceptively simple concept, really, even a child could do it. For instance, if one were casting a water spell and reinforced it with the words water form swirls and pierce for said spell, you'd end up with a much more powerful version of the magic you were trying to create. Some incantations were longer or shorter, depending on the strength of said spell you were trying to create. Push back, repel the vile knave, would result in a strengthened telekinetic shove against your enemy. It was no Tridenter Shinra Tensei to be sure, but still useful when you wanted to get some distance. Likewise, the focused command bind this wandering knave would bind someone in place. And those were only the most basic of spells he'd concocted. Strangely enough, Dad didn't use incantations for some reason. Mom was still away on her trip to the northern continent Solitas, as he'd come to call it, so he hadn't a chance to ask her either. And while her spells were powerful, they all seemed kinda basic, you know? Had he invented something new? No way. Surely this was common knowledge. Right? In his case, it was easier to take his chakra and magic, meld them together and make something much more direct, and infinitely more dangerous. Opening his right hand, he visualized what he wanted and conjured an item to his hand, a small spiraling sword that he in turn set to the string and drew back, forcing it to expand, stretching into the rough shape of an arrow. Scarlet sparks skittered around his fingers, bled into the blade, threatened to bend the bow he even now held. A grin split his face as his fingers struggled to hold the sword arrow in place. It wanted to be used, no, more than that, it longed to be unleashed. A weapon like this needed a name, didn't it? On a whim, he harkened back to the tale of a sacred sword he'd discovered in an old storybook, one read to him by Dad. With a threat of breath, he whispered its name. Kalidbalg. Thus speaking, he let the arrow fly. He was not disappointed. Not at all. A deafening sonic boom simultaneously shattered the ground underfoot and pierced the heavens all at once as he unleashed his arrow. That stray cloud high above summarily evaporated into wispy shreds of pale white as the sword missile vanished across the horizon. This time, there was no mountain to stop his attack. It kept going until it vanished from sight, streaking across the sea, where he hoped-prayed it would land with a harmless splash. If not, well, that thing was gonna ruin someone's day the next continent over. It would be fine, right? Right. Kalidbalg crossed the sea in an instant, and crashed down into the Brahmin tribe like the fist of an angry god. That day, their fear of their dark mistress intensified tenfold. Praise be Salem. Naruto shrugged, hoping otherwise. What are the chances of it hitting someone? It'll be fine. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Are you sure about that, young master? Gah! Sneaky schnee! Jolting with a startled hiss, he pivoted in place to glare at the maid in question. In the years since he'd blown up a mountain and accidentally acquired her services, Schnee had truly come into her own. Moreover, she actually looked healthy now. Her long white hair shone with a lovely luster, once drooping pointed ears now perked and alert, bright blue eyes half-lidded with amusement. These days she wore a dark blue combat outfit replete with white frills and a combat skirt, like most of the maid staff. A slender metal rapier hung from her hip and a many-pronged silver snowflake pinned just shy of her collarbone to indicate her station. Dad and his darn symbols. He'd never understand them. Still, so long as she was happy. She was staring at him, though. How much of that did you hear? Her pointed ears wiggled happily. Hear what? Was she playing dumb? If so, why? Naruto squinted at her. She smiled back, eyes closed. I still can't tell what she's thinking. Such a strange girl. Even now he found it somewhat alarming just how quickly Schnee taken to him. There had been a period of uncertainty as the elf girl. Was she really a faunus? Adjusted to her new duties, but all things considered, she'd acclimated rather well. Apparently he'd done a favor in taking her in, given she was an orphan with no parents, something he hadn't known beforehand. As such, the castle staff were more than happy to accept her as one of their own, and she'd truly come into her own. He'd happily accept her slightly obsessive nature over her being openly distrustful. After all, one slightly crazy friend was better than no friends at all, no? Even if she's my maid. Salem Mom would probably be over the moon to meet her when she returned. If she returned, stop that. Naruto shook his head fiercely, banishing such thoughts before they could take root. Dad had gone on long expeditions before, and he'd always returned in one piece. Mom was sturdier still. There must be a reason she was taking so long. Maybe she had a surprise planned or something. Great, now he was worried. Most of Mom's surprises were spectacular to say the least. Young Master Nero? He came back to himself just in time to find Shni's face inches from his. She laid a hand on his forehead and hummed thoughtfully, blue eyes peering deeply into his own. Are you feeling well? When he didn't react to her provocation, she removed her hand, placed it upon his shoulder, and pressed her head to his. Do you perhaps have a fever? Any normal 9-year-old prince would have sputtered and blushed at such close contact, shoved her away, then started crying about cooties. He wasn't a child, hadn't been one for quite some time now, even if he did suffer the occasional emotional lapse, and as amusing as it might be to perpetuate the ruse with her, he simply didn't care to. Not with her. With a patient sigh he batted her hand down and drew back, placing some much-needed distance between the two of them. I'm fine, Shni. A fleeting flicker of disappointment flashed across the young girl's pale visage, there and gone before he could think to comment on it. He wondered why she was upset. Was it something he'd said? Regardless, she soon smoothed her expression into one of quiet complacency, inclined her head, and sketched a polite curtsy. She'd gotten better at those, he noted. As you say, young master. Stowing his bow over one shoulder, he planted his right hand on his hip and stared her down until she raised her gaze again. Was there something you wanted? She shook her head, setting her long hair swaying for a moment as she met his gaze. I was merely doing as your father bid, young master. The time was still suspicious. Naruto quirked a pale brow at her. And what might that be? An innocuous blink followed the first. Making sure you're healthy, of course. By staring at me? Yes. Naruto dragged a hand down his face. Dad wasn't giving her ideas again, was he? He must have, because now the poor girl was pouting for some reason. Or maybe he'd done something to upset her and not realized. That settled it. Girls were confusing. He didn't think he'd ever truly understand them, no matter how many times he was reborn. Still, he had to do something before she took it into her head that she'd offended him. He'd accidentally made her cry once. Once. Never again. There, step back in, he patted the smaller girl's head. You're doing just fine. Much to his surprise, Shni latched onto his wrist with both hands and held it there, keeping his fingers fixed firmly atop her scalp as she stared sullenly at the floor. Fine isn't enough. Her voice trembled with worrying fervor, a sentiment he had grown all too familiar with. I need to be perfect. No one's perfect, Shni. She wouldn't meet his gaze. Not even your parents? Not even them, he snorted, trying not to laugh. Especially not them. That's heresy. She mumbled under her breath. You shouldn't say such things of the king and queen. The gods will hear you. He scoffed in the face of her fear. Then call me a heretic. I'm their only son. What are they gonna do, banish me? I think not. Shni shushed him hurriedly, to no avail. Of course. He'd almost forgotten, hadn't he? It was so easy to forget. Everyone practically worshipped Salem and Ozma as gods, divinity incarnate, heaven sent from above. Their continent was one of the few bastions of order left in all of Remnant, one that was looking to expand, at that. Someday they might become emperor and empress of the world for all he knew. To call them gods, though, no. Just no. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, Salem and Ozma were immortal. Yes, his parents possessed incredible powers. Yes, they'd become undoubtedly strong. But they weren't divine. Did a goddess accidentally burn a roast goose and serve the charred remains up for dinner with a chagrined smile on her face? Did a god accidentally put his tunic and trousers on backwards, then trip over his own 2 feet down the stairs? Did a goddess or god make complete fools of themselves whenever his birthday came around? A small, rueful smile tugged at the corner of his mouth at that thought. Oh yes, his parents were many things, with many facets, and in many ways the center of his world. But they were not, nor would they ever be gods. Of course, he couldn't make Shni understand that. How could she, when she'd only been in the castle for a year? In the end, he shook his head. There are no gods here, Shni. Not anymore. Don't try to be like them, you'll just waste your time. Her lips pursed in a thin line as her fingers bit into his. Then, if I can't be perfect, I'll get as close as I can. He laughed. And that means seeing to my every need, does it? Yes. Naruto inhaled deeply and bit back on a sigh, turning it into a cough instead. Razor Shni was still a child after all. Even if she didn't act like it most of the time, she at least had an excuse for it, having 2 years on him. He himself had no such excuse. While his new body might be childish, his mind remained very much that of a young man, and though he'd since sharpened it through these last few years of training, there were still things in this world that he didn't understand. He could be honest about that, accept it, and move on. Shni, meanwhile, could not. She was trying so hard to be the adult she wasn't, and became deeply frustrated when she failed to assume the role she'd chosen for herself. In that regard, he couldn't help but baby her. It was his nature. Still, maybe her earnest, hard-working nature wasn't entirely a bad thing. Tousling her hair, he made a snap decision. Shni. She blinked once, but didn't waver. My lord? Would you like to learn magic? Her eyes fluttered shut and open again in a rapid blink. That's impossible. The gods. Ah. He pushed a finger against her lips, shushing her in return as she had unto him. I decide what's possible, not them. Surely it couldn't be that hard. He had magic for days. It wasn't as though he was giving it to her, but using a small bit of his own energy her to unlock her potential. These people might not have the blood of Ozma and Salem running through them, but they had something slumbering deep within them. Call it an aura if you will, a mere shadow of his own power, a semblance of what once was. He could sense it, just as he could so many things. But how to draw it out? Maybe with an incantation? That might work. Best be careful though, you couldn't go mucking about with someone's soul and not expect consequences. Shni perked up suddenly, tensing under his hand. Lord Nero, someone is watching us. Finally noticed, had she? A lopsided smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I know. He'd become aware of their unwanted guest 5 minutes ago. She blinked, startled. You noticed it as well, then? Anything I noticed is secondary. He flicked her forehead, slung an arm over her shoulder, and steered her away from the entrance to the courtyard, careful not to let their would-be voyeur catch on. What's important is that you noticed something. You've been practicing, haven't you? She managed a quick nod and tried to turn. Yes, but shouldn't we? Sure, he hummed. Don't let them realize the game's up just yet. Without turning his head, his gaze slid to the left, eyeing the castle ramparts above, their dark stones silhouetted against the sun. You'll spoil all the fun. Gauging his steps, he made certain to place himself and Shni firmly between the hidden observer and the courtyard exit. Then, louder now, he raised his voice, allowing their eager eavesdropper to overhear them once more. All I am is a prince, a ramen lover, and a magic maniac. Despite that, until recently, my senses weren't all that sharp. But yours are. The life you led outside the castle, dodging death every day, that's resulted in you having something you don't, a sensitivity to danger. It's a remarkable thing. So speaking, he turned his head fully toward the castle ramparts. Wouldn't you agree? A pall of silence fell over the courtyard. She tucked herself into his side, trying to push him behind her, but he wasn't having it. He dug his feet in and stared at the nearest balustrade on the castle walls, fixed firmly at the tall stack of crates wedged against it, left forgotten by the guards during their duties. Not by him. Give us the silent treatment, eh? Naruto kept staring, one hand inching towards the bough on his back as he craned his head toward the nearest parapet. You did a decent job concealing your presence and intent, I'll give you that, But you can't hide your scent, you know. With his free hand, he tapped his nose. Not from me. Someone moved behind the boxes. You don't have to hide, you know. Whatever business you have with me, we can talk it over. Just come on out. His smile thinned. Or I can blast you out of there. Your choice. No response. So be it. Draw his bow, he conjured 3 wrought iron arrows to the string, drawing the latter back with intent. The sound echoed out over the empty courtyard where were the guards, as he drew a bead on his target. Inhaling in quiet annoyance, he planted his feet and moved his hips, careful to place himself firmly between Schnee and the stake of crates. Last chance? Movement flickered in his peripherals. Naruto let the arrows fly as one. Sure enough, they decimated the stacked crates in a shower of splinters. However, in the same instant he heard Schnee cry out behind him in surprise, for her, at least. Not so him. By the time the knife stabbed out at his face, it tasted only empty air. He'd already begun moving the moment he released the bowstring. Pivoting on his right heel, he took up his great bow in both hands, swept his loyal mate aside, and brought it crashing down like a righteous hammer on the head of their attacker. It was a very heavy bow. The results were thus. Clonk! A man's pained grunt accompanied by the dull crunch of a fractured skull were his reward. In no time at all, he found himself gazing down at a dazed fellow garbed entirely in black from head to toes sprawled out at his feet. Much of their face was concealed by a dark cloth and a hood besides, further obscuring their identity from his curious gaze. You're 100 years too early to try assassinating me. He patted the man's cheek almost affectionately. Good try, though. Tooting softly, he tore away the hood and half-mask away in short order to reveal. Yeah, he had no idea who this was. The would-be assassin was a slim fellow, all things considered, with a sullen countenance, of green hair, beady eyes, brown, pallid visage, bearing an X-shaped scar across his right cheek. Didn't exactly look like the charitable sort, you know? He was quite stunned for the moment, but already he could see him coming around. A quick pat on the cheek expedited it. At length, those dazed eyes focused on him. How did you? Naruto crouched down before him, idly resting on his haunches. 10. The man blinked, not quite comprehending his words, much less their meaning. What? You're the 10th person to try and kill me this year alone, he explained, idly muffling a yawn with the back of his one hand. Really, it's become a rite of passage now than anything else. An idle chuckle escaped him as the mangled man before him growled impotently. The one before you was an old woman, can you believe that? Crazy Biddy gave me a poison apple. He tooted at the memory. Gave me one hell of a stomachache, I'll give her that, but I've dealt with worse. Do you know what I did with her? His would-be murderer snarled. Killed her? Naruto smiled. It was all teeth. She works in the kitchens now. Makes a mean meatloaf. The man's jaw clicked open, unable to accept what he'd just been told. Ha! Under strict supervision, of course, Naruto patted the man's messy head affectionately, drawing an irate growl from him. Wouldn't do for her to get ideas. That said, she's been on her best behavior ever since. Sends all her wages to her grandchildren. The one before her was just a boy, a plucky little thief who tried to steal my favorite horse. Nowadays he works in the stables. He has a warm place to sleep at night, and no shortage of food these days. Needless to say, hasn't made an attempt since. Schnee huffed angrily behind him. I still say you should have killed him. Naruto tooted and shook his head, but refused to take his eyes off the broken assassin before him. And then where would I be? I'd have 10 corpses, and they're not good for much besides fertilizer. It was so easy to answer like with like, wasn't it? Agony with agony, pain with pain, violence with violence. We must be better than this. Really, he sighed, you should be glad it's me you tried to kill. If you'd gone for my parents, they would have had you flogged and strung up before the castle gates as an example. When the poor fellow didn't answer, he took pity on him and further expounded on his explanation. The point I'm making is this. I like helping people almost as much as I enjoy making allies out of my enemies. So why don't you tell me what's bothering you, and I'll do my best to fix it, eh? The assassin glared at him sullenly. Monster. Am I? Naruto tilted his head and blinked once. I don't feel like a monster, said staring persisted. Honestly, these people. Naruto sighed anew. You don't trust me, eh? Well, not that I blame you. The others took some convincing before they came around. The people will revolt. You'll see. Shni tooted indignantly and reached for her rapier. Allow me to take his tongue for such lies. Naruto waved her down. Now. He knows nothing. Her anger didn't fade so easily. Much to his chagrin, only had eyes for the assassin. Our people are safe, protected, and fed. They want for nothing. What she said, Naruto nodded sagely, stowing his bow over one shoulder. I'm trying to improve their lives. If I wanted to, I could have handed you and the 9 before you over to the guards. It would be simple, easier for sure, even. Problem is, he made a fist in one hand and smacked it down onto an open palm. If I do that, my folks are gonna overreact and crack down on everyone. I don't want that. The assassin stared at him sullenly. Was he getting through to them? Hard to say. Naruto chose a different avenue of attack. Ask yourself this. What happens if you die? Who will miss you? Mourn you? There must be someone. The man's face closed down. I have a daughter. Splendid. Naruto brought his hands together in a resounding clap. Now we're getting somewhere. She's unwell, isn't she? The poor fellow's eyes practically bugged out of his head. Shni glanced his way. How did you? Elementary, my dear. Naruto tapped a finger to his forehead and returned his gaze to his failed killer. You don't strike me as the suicidal sort. Why else would you be willing to take on a job like this? The assassin looked like he wanted nothing more than to swallow his tongue, but beneath their combined gaze, he finally relented. She's very ill. I can't afford medicine. A sad situation, but it left holes in his tale. That still doesn't explain why you sought my head. Silence reigned supreme. What's your name? Garnet Sustrai. Garnet? Like the jewel? Not bad. Wasn't that another word for emerald, though? Meh, probably not important. It wasn't like helping this random guy was going to change the future any for his descendants. You gonna turn me in? Shni butted in before Naruto could think to answer. Why not bring your daughter to the castle? Surely the king and queen could. Garnet scoffed at that. It was a sharp, bitter sound emerging from his dry throat. A mere pauper like me? The guards drove me away and gave me this. Besides, he jerked a thumb to his scarred cheek and turned a bleak look on her. You were lucky. You were chosen. The rest of us are driven away whenever we try to entreat with the gods. Naruto's smile died an ugly death. Is that so? I'll be having a word with the guards. Who sent you? Garnet hung his head. It doesn't matter now. My life is already forfeit. A woman offered me a great deal of gold on the condition I bring her your head. She gave me that. So speaking, he jerked his chin toward the broken twisted knife he'd wielded only a short while ago. Called it a black knife, said it was magically enchanted, that it would kill you. A single stab was all I needed. Naruto reached down to retrieve the ghastly thing and held it by the hilt at arm's length. It really was an esoteric piece of work, warped and twisted in the strangest places, possessing 3 outward-facing prongs, 2 of which served as a guard of sorts before tapering off into a third, which then flowed down into a slender curve, one that looked more designed for slashing instead of stabbing. A strange dark red murk gleamed across its length as he held it up to the sun, as though it were trying to drink in the very light itself. This was a weapon made for one purpose, and one alone. Death. Is that magic? Schnee sensed it, and quivered behind him. This shouldn't be possible. Naruto finished, the last dredges of his amusement draining away as he gazed down at the weapon. It was a simple matter to open a storage space via one of his spell, he called it hammer space, and stow the tool away for later. Magic was presently exclusive to his family, and while he was considering unlocking Schnee Razor's potential, the fact remained that he hadn't yet. Therefore, it shouldn't be possible for anyone else to possess that power. Mom had been abundantly clear on that last bit. Magic was a gift long since lost, save for the three of them. So who was this bastard? He glared at Garnet with renewed intensity, eyes burning red. What did this man look like? The assassin wilted beneath his gaze. I don't know. I only spoke to her once, and she kept her face hidden the entire time. When Naruto made an irritated noise at the lack of information, Garnet proved quick to hasten on, babbling a bit. I remember her clothes, though. She wore dark violet robes. They smelled strange, almost like ash. She was generous, too. Paid me half right up front, said I'd get the other half when I brought her your head. Half up front, you say? A nod. Did this woman give you a place to meet when the deed was done? Another nod on Garnet's part. She did. An absolutely evil grin split Naruto's face. Great. Then you won't mind bringing this wicked woman my head? Schnee squawked in alarm, eyes wide. My lord? Oh, hush. He shushed her. It won't actually be my head. I've got an idea. A mad, brilliant idea, one just crazy enough to work, and if it helped him track down this chaotic vixen, all the better. If someone else in this world could use magic, then he had to know who they were. Had to meet them, at the very least. Someone might say that was foolish of him. Perhaps it was, but it was times such as these that he couldn't help himself. Curiosity got the better of him. He had to know. He wanted to know. He needed to know. Schnee, however, dithered, wringing her hands anxiously. Shouldn't we let your Lord Father know? We could, he shrugged a shoulder. Or we could solve this ourselves, save the day, and be bid God's damned heroes. She perked up. Just the two of us? Alone? Yup. Her ears wiggled happily. On second thought, that sounds grand. Naruto tooted. You're entirely too honest with yourself. Honest with whom? Naruto froze. Schnee squeaked. Garnet groveled into the dirt and buried his face deep, looking like he wanted nothing more than to shrivel up and die. In hindsight, Naruto couldn't really blame the poor bastard, because you see, he knew that voice. Just as he knew the shadow that had fallen over them. Salem had returned from her journey. And his mother, well, she didn't look happy. Not a jot. Distantly, he was aware of someone standing behind Salem, but he didn't dare take his eyes off her to gaze at the guests she'd brought him. Because, you see, Mom was smiling. It was not a nice smile, not at all. Gulp. Things just got a lot more complicated. Nero, she hummed his second name slowly, the word emerging as a silken purr, veritably vibrating with subtle menace. Surely you weren't intending to sneak out of the castle, were you? That would mean you intended to deliberately disobey me. You know better than that. She tried to raise her hand, tried to save him. Actually, Your Grace, it was my idea. Please punish me instead. Salem's gaze fixed firmly upon the poor maid. And who are you? You weren't here when I left. Naruto coughed into a fist, trying to save her in return. Well. Too little, too late. Salem saw the two of them standing together, so close to one another, and came to her own inevitable conclusion, as all mothers are wont to do. He knew it the moment her red eyes widened. Mom, no. It's not what it looks like. I.e. The terrifying impasse shattered with a sudden shriek of delight, as Salem swept him up into her arms with a giddy squeal. My baby boy brought a girl home. Naruto sighed into her embrace. It took Naruto the better part of an hour to calm Salem. Even then, much to Naruto's eternal chagrin, his newfound mother most assuredly did not let him go, nor did she put him down, nay would she release him in any form or fashion. If anything, Salem only clung on tighter, determined to do her damnedest to make up for lost time. Under any other circumstance he might have found that funny, but for one thing. Salem had strong arms. You'd think she wouldn't, given she hadn't trained a day in her life, but apparently up and vanishing for a year counted as a training arc, because he didn't remember her being this strong. My baby boy. Giggling merrily, she all but crushed his face into her bosom as she swayed to and fro, shaking him like a rag doll. Mama's so proud. Suffocating. Couldn't breathe. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Sure, that's great. Real proud. Now can you let me go? Nonsense. He felt his spine contort painfully under her embrace. I have an entire year without hugs to make up for. Did you think I would have my fill after merely an hour? And besides, you brought a girl home. Shinee absolutely squeaked in the background. Kurama would have had a caustic comment for that, but also a plan. Lacking both, the poor prince pounced on the only option available to him. Ergo, he threw said Shinee under the bus. Plucking his head from his mother's magnificent memories, never thought he'd be using those words in a sentence. Naruto used the last of his breath to turn her glee elsewhere. Aren't you forgetting something? Salem stilled. Am I? You haven't even asked her name yet. Salem frowned. Considered now. Tilted her head. And dropped him. Task failed successfully. You're right. I haven't, have I? She practically purred. Let's remedy that. Shinee sputtered and stepped back, realizing she was being thrown to the wolves, but it was too late. You there, girl? So speaking, Salem rounded on the poor elf fauness in question, red eyes narrow and intent with single-minded fervor to thrust a gray finger in her face, all but demanding an answer before she even asked the question. What's your name? The poor maid tucked both arms behind her back and bowed her head. Shinee, my goddess. Salem considered her intently. And your full name? Shinee Razor. Salem scrutinized her severely, gaze drawn to mere slits. Naruto almost felt bad for the poor girl. Almost. He was too busy regenerating from cracked ribs and a bent spine to contemplate much else at the moment. Still, it didn't preclude him from listening in with one ear as he basked in his reprieve. By now Salem all but towered over Shinee, awaiting her response. You have designs on my son, do you? Naruto fought down a disbelieving snort, knowing it would only draw attention to him and lead to him being glomped all over again. Shinee? Liking him? Preposterous. She was young, she didn't know what love was. Hell, he had been reincarnated and even he barely understood the concept himself. At this point the poor girl was probably just trying to curry favor to survive Salem's scrutiny. Not that he blamed her, of course, he didn't. She was just a child after all. You aren't angry, Your Grace? Naruto did a double take. Wait a second. On the contrary, Salem crouched down before her and cupped her cheek with her right hand. I approve. My father tried to make many a match for me when I was but half your age. She shrugged a pale shoulder. Such were the times, I suppose. Frankly, I was beginning to fear my darling Nero might not be interested in marriage at all. To think he'd go out and snatch up a bride for himself. Excuse me? Well done, child. As he looked on aghast, Salem kissed Shni's forehead. Your goddess is pleased. You have my blessing. Best of luck to you. What? Shni practically flung herself at Salem's feet. Praise be. His mother preened, pleased by the display. Yes, I'm quite magnificent, aren't I? Do stand up, dear. You'll ruin your uniform. Peering past her, she fixed Garnet with a glare. And who might you be? The poor fellow looked like he wanted to shrivel up and die. Not that he blamed him, Mom had that effect on most people. Also, excuse me. I didn't agree to any marriage. No vows were said. He's an assassin, ma'am. Garnet wheezed. Naruto whipped a stern glare Shni's way. Much to his chagrin, she ignored his ire and dutifully relayed most of Garnet's story to her from start to finish. Before long, not long at all, Naruto once more found himself the sole subject of his mother's glare. Is this true? He sighed, slightly stung by Shni's treachery, even if she didn't believe it to be such. Snitch! Party pooper! Goody two-shoes! Ahem. Almost lost myself in another childish outburst there. Gotta watch that. Coughing into a fist, he dragged himself upright off the cracked stone floor, dusted his clothes down, and fixed the queen with his most regal stare. She left out the part where he was tricked by someone who claims they can do magic. Salem's gaze sharpened to scarlet slits. Did they now? Garnet nodded into the cobblestones, not daring to speak, let alone look her in the eye for fear of being struck dead on the spot. Naruto stepped between the two of them just in case she got the idea regardless. I promised to help him. Her gaze didn't waver. And why is that? Aha! I was waiting for that. You've activated my trap card, mother of mine. Naruto clasped both hands behind his back, adopted a pouty expression, and kicked at the stone floor. He has a sick daughter he's also struggling to care for. That's why he accepted the job in the first place. Isn't that sad, Mom? If he dies, no one will be able to look after her. Salem wavered. A daughter. Garnet, perhaps realizing what he intended, nodded fervently into the floor. Time for the final blow. Wouldn't it be nice to have more children around? She could be a maid for my future sisters. There we go, entwined the thought of another maid with that of other children, her children, the many daughters she had yet to have. As ever, the idea of babies were her weak spot. With that last little nudge, his mother folded faster than a house of cards on a rainy day. Why didn't you say so? Her voice peaked with equal parts intrigue and concern as she all but rounded on Garnet. Bring your daughter here at once. Ozma shall heal her. Naruto considered offering his own services. After all, he could do it just as well, but refrained at the last second. His parents already didn't know he could regenerate. If they realized the true depth of his abilities, they'd never let him out of their sight again. They might come to fear that he would leave. He had no intention of doing so anytime soon, mind you, but it was best to keep that thought from their minds for a while. But Salem was still speaking and he forced himself to focus. Henceforth the two of you shall serve in the castle. She has a maid in you. Her pale brow furrowed for a moment before she came to a decision. I suppose Nero does need a pet to practice his spells on. Garnet gulped. Nope. Naruto coughed into a fist. That won't be necessary. I'd rather have him as a bodyguard. Salem waved a hand dismissively, content to defer to him in this matter. Bodyguard it is, then. The ground cracked as Garnet's Sustride practically headbutted it, nearly cracking his skull in his fervor. Many thanks, Your Grace. Salem waved a hand his way dismissively. Do not thank me, thank my son for his mercy. Go and gather your things. I expect you and your daughter in the castle by nightfall. Garnet dared to raise his gaze. My queen? Did you not hear me? Get. Garnet got. Naruto watched him scramble away with a bemused smile. It was remarkable what a little kindness could do. Almost magical, really. Speaking of which. Craning his neck, he spared Shni a withering glance before looking back to his mother. There's still the matter of the one who hired him. Salem's eyes gleamed like balefire, almost glowing at the edges. Leave that to me. Tempting, but he couldn't allow that. As amusing as it might be to let this mysterious mage drown in Grim, it would be a monumental waste. This mysterious mage might have secrets, magics he'd never heard of before. Moreover, he wondered who they were. Garnet had mentioned a woman in violet robes, and while that didn't exactly narrow it down, with his superior senses, he could. Magic had a very distinct presence to it, for lack of a better word, and while Kurama had passed on, many of his abilities like those of Old Man Sage still lingered in him long after their parting. He was still able to heal others and moreover, he retained the ability to sense things, not just negative emotions, or wise, but people as well when he focused. For instance, Salem shimmered in his sixth sight a corona of comforting darkness, tinged with threads of red. Ozma, meanwhile, burned like a beacon, bright and pure. He knew what magic was, what it felt like, and more aptly, he could track it. Even if this mysterious mage were actively tamping down their magic, hiding it, they couldn't erase it, not completely. Unlike chakra, magic longed to be used once it was awakened. He needed to find a way to sneak out of the castle and find this person. Alone, since Shni would probably tattle on him. He'd be careful, of course. He wasn't so arrogant as to think himself invincible. If this mage could supposedly make knives that could hurt, or even kill immortals, then he would take precautions. A fool he might have been before, but he was nothing if not thorough in this lifetime. Naturally, he said none of this and feigned a limpid smile for Salem's sake. Of course, mother. It hurt a little, lying to her, if only because she believed him all too easily. Good, you understand. Ah, but I digress. I brought you a birthday gift. Naruto's brows shot up into his hair. You did? Indeed. Salem looked over her shoulder suddenly, where a hooded figure stood in stoic silence, their body and face all but hidden beneath cloth and cowl. He hadn't really noticed them in the chaos, yet now that he was aware of their presence, he couldn't help but stare. I've left you standing there long enough. Reveal yourself. Their head bowed. Understood. The cloak flew into the air. He'd expected a guard. This was not. At all. He found himself gazing upon a tall, beautifully well-endowed young woman with silver eyes. Said eyes matched her incredibly long pale hair, tinged with a tint of light blue bound in a long ponytail over one shoulder. Her attire consisted of a long-sleeved maid's outfit with a navy blue corset, long skirt, and knee-length boots of the same color. He didn't fail to notice the long sword she carried at her hip. Silver eyes, eh? Now why did that worry him? And who might this be? Though the girl's gaze burned into him, she didn't answer. This is Silpha. Salem swept an arm out toward the stranger and simultaneously stepped aside, allowing said newcomer to saunter forward. She was supposed to be the present for your 10th birthday, given that I missed it. Don't worry, she added almost as an afterthought, she's 15. 15? Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. And she already looks like that? Yeesh. And here I am, not even 10. Life was cruel. Her words caught up to him a moment later, however. Wait, did you say 10? Salem preened, cupping her chin with one hand. I did indeed. It was with fond exasperation that he corrected her. Mom, I'm 9. Nonsense, she retorted, holding up a finger. 10 is a far more handsome number than 9, and the age at which young men begin to court young women. Therefore, you are 10. Naruto slapped a hand to his forehead. What kind of flawed argument was that? Must be a cultural thing. However, he wasn't so much as touching a girl in any meaningful way until he hit his upper teens. Thank you very much. It just wasn't done. If either Schnee or another girl he liked was still making eyes at him come that age, then he'd consider it. Until then? Nope, nope, nope. Speaking of Schnee, she was squirming sullenly behind him, staring at the still silent Silpha. He couldn't blame her for being envious. There were only 3 years between the two of them, yet the disparity was plain as night and day. Hell, he was envious and he was a guy. Curious, are we? Salem continued on unabated, mistaking his silence for acceptance. I found her on the northern continent, if you must know. Naruto tilted his head. You mean Solidas? She blinked, bemused. Oh, are you naming them now? He was indeed. It was a system he intended to bring forward to father once the boundaries were finally drawn and proper maps made. They could hard keep calling them north, east, and west forever now, could they? Sooner or later they had to come up with names. He'd given it plenty of thought as he pored over them. Sanus for them, Anima for the continent in the east, and Solidas in the north sounded about right. There was also that deserted land across the ocean further to the south, but it had an active volcano and was more an island than a continent at the moment, so it didn't count. Patch wouldn't become Patch for centuries yet, but it seemed as good place as any to test his spells. Besides, everyone knew that volcanoes and dragons went hand. He might actually find one there. Who knew? Just thinking about it made him curious. He hadn't yet created a spell that would let him walk safely through dragon fire or swim in lava yet, but there was a first time for everything. Silpha stepped forward suddenly, one hand resting upon her blade's hilt, demanding his attention. I was led to believe that you were strong. He smiled up at her. I am. She looked to Salem in return. May I? Salem granted her a nod. By all means, you may. Naruto frowned, concerned by the byplay. May what now? Silpha's sword slashed in at his face. Schnee gasped at the abrupt burst of violence, but Naruto, having seen it coming, muttered a quick cantrip under his breath. Steel is my body and fire is my blood. Her blade ricocheted off his forehead with an audible clang, sending the strike wide. Silpha's disdain morphed into surprise as she stumbled back. How? Salem tooted. And here I thought you'd parry it. I can if you like. Silpha swiped at him again and he casually plucked the rapier from Schnee's waist to parry her, forcing her blade high once more, higher than before. Alarmed by his sudden skill, the older girl stepped back, to which he gave chase, lazily flicking his borrowed weapon. She wasn't worthy of his true treasures upward to touch her chin. That's one point. He chided the silver-eyed warrior with a merry smile. Wanna go for 3? Her eyes flashed angrily, lips pursing in a mulish pout. That was a fluke. Ah, the arrogance of youth. He lowered the rapier and switched hands, bringing his dominant arm behind his back. He locked it in place there, fingers clenched into a fist. Then you'll have no problem proving me wrong, surely. The challenge was clear. Come at me. I can take you with one arm behind my back. Sure enough, her brow furrowed. My queen, may I stop holding back now? Salem positively preened at that remark. Go right ahead. Naruto hummed. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Silpha blurred. Her sword hissed in at his face with tenfold speed to strike his nose, or so it would have, if he hadn't dodged. His spine bent backwards, shoulders nearly horizontal with the cobblestones for a moment, as he let naked steel whistle harmlessly past. Time seemed to slow in his mind's eye and he found himself granted a prime view of her eyes widening, even as he beheld his own manic grin reflected within her gaze. In an instant he kicked off the ground, snapped his body back into place, and thrust his borrowed rapier forward, meeting her blade tit for tat, edge to edge. Once, twice, thrice. Their blades collided rapidly time and time again, so much so that he soon lost count of the collisions and went on the attack himself, aiming for her wrists in an attempt to disarm her. She narrowly blocked each attack in quick tandem, sweat beading upon her brow. Flummoxed by his speed, Sylpha swept her sword southward, striking for his knees, seeking to sweep his legs. Predictable. He hopped over her attack and gently poked her bosom with his rapier. Couldn't possibly ignore a target like that, you know? Sylpha yelped aloud. It was a startled, unladylike sound, made all the more prevalent by the high hint of pink in her cheeks as she stumbled back, warding one arm over her breasts. You dare. Hey, this was fun. Maybe he ought to invest more time into swordplay. Cackling, he waggled Shni's rapier at Sylpha, grinning like a loon all the while. 2 points. Behind him, Shni giggled into her palm. Well struck. Salem clapped politely, though her words were anything but. Come now, Sylpha. Surely you can land at least one blow. Something in Sylpha's sight sparked. Prince Nero, was it? The hair on the back of his neck rose. Yees? Sylpha braved her blade with both hands. I shall trample you now. Naruto beckoned, unable to help himself. Promises, promises. Movement behind him. Instinct took and pivoted without a second thought, blocking high as always. That proved a mistake, because Sylpha's overhand strike smashed into his guard like a comet to fracture his wrist. Pain snarled down his arm, forcing his limb low, and for once, he was the one to retreat. She capitalized upon the brief opening as any true swordswoman would, slashing in at his feet, forcing him to kick backward lest he lose a toe. Dang, he shot a rueful glance at his damaged limb as he lurched backward. That's my own fault for not reinforcing my arm. Should have known better, gotta watch that. Where are you looking? Sylpha smashed into him yet again with a vertical thrust, and he blocked without thinking, realizing his mistake a moment too late. It was a feint. Even as he moved to intercept her, she switched hands on him and drove another two-handed attack down into his guard slash. While his mind was prepared to react, his body was not. His eyes widened in a brief burst of surprise as his collarbone cracked. It was only sheer force of will that kept him from dropping Shni's weapon then and there. If she'd been a blur before, she was a storm now. Her blade wove a cage of savage steel around him, forcing him to defend as he never had before. All the while she kept up the attack, never giving him a moment to rest, let alone think. Shni's rapier began to bend beneath the barrage, then break. He could feel it about to snap. No wonder. Physically speaking, Sylpha was taller than him, older, stronger, and had a longer reach as a result. Moreover, she was braving a blade clearly designed to be two-handed, while he was stuck using a rapier, a tool meant for thrusting attacks. No matter which way you sliced it, all those attributes put him at a disadvantage. He needed a better weapon, needed to actually try. Her sword scythed down with ever-increasing strength and speed, forcing a series of increasingly painful parries on his part with one arm. Spells were one thing, but he wasn't a master when it came to swords just yet. If he were a normal child, he might have folded by now. Sure, he hadn't been normal for quite some time now, but even so, he was being pushed. With one arm. A feral grin split his face. Well, alright then. Color me impressed. With an exasperated sigh, he flung Shni's rapier into Sylpha's face. She didn't hesitate in the slightest and smacked it aside, the act of which only bought him a moment of time. Even as he forced healing magic into his battered limb and willed his bones to knit back together, she moved in for the finishing blow, sword swinging for his chest. Exactly as he knew she would. A moment was all he needed. He bought himself more than enough time. Mumbling under his breath, he performed a quick backstep and stabbed a hand into the air just shy of his right hip, delving his fingers into the golden portal of his magic, where he kept his treasured creation stored in a separate space from reality. He'd stored Garrett's so-called black knife here only recently, but that wasn't what he needed now. Calibulb wouldn't do either. He needed something more. Within its shimmering depths he found what he sought. His hand curled around a worn hilt, and with a fiery flourish, he withdrew a new weapon as one would draw a sword from its sheath. This sword wasn't nice. Once a glittering gold on silver, it had since been stained black from one too many magical experiments. Still, it would serve. Arondite. Braving the blackened blade with both hands, Naruto stomped one foot down, raised it overhead, and brought it down. Still on the attack, Sylpha saw the slash and somehow managed to tumble aside at the last instant. Well, that she did too, else he might have cut her in half. Even then, the subsequent shockwave drove her back, forcing her to ward her own blade before her face in the windstorm that followed. Righting himself, Naruto barked a laugh, brandishing his treasured tool in hand. What a rush! I haven't had this much fun in ages. Grinning, he tilted his head. What did you say your name was? She frowned, regarding his sword of shadows with wary eyes. Sylpha Langlease, my lord. Heat burned within him. Good, I'll remember that. Now defend yourself. They collided in a storm of swords. Salem watched her son fight with a fond smile. For what mother did not take pride in the power of her children? Nero had been born strong, had grown stronger, and he'd only become stronger still since her absence. Strong indeed. She watched him range around the courtyard, fending off Sylpha with a smile. Now that he'd begun using both hands and a proper weapon, he fought with savage elegance, beating her back with ease. Not to say that the northern girl didn't acquit herself well, she did, but it simply wasn't enough. She already knew how this devastating duel would end. Alas, little Shni was left sulking in the background, and not over her ruined rapier as one might suspect. No, no, no. Her ice blue eyes were fixed firmly on Nero's back, hands curled into tight fists at her side, her pale visage torn somewhere between longing and anger. Caught canoodling indeed. Ah, young love! The poor girl. Salem knew that jealous look all too well. It was the same look she had worn when some horridly haughty hussy tried to steal Ozma out from under her. That had been, what, years ago, now? So hard to remember. Long before Nero's birth, certainly. She hadn't killed her, of course. That would be cruel. She'd turned her into a frog. These days that pompous princess lived quite a humble life in the castle pond, lapping up flies. Whatever was her name again? She couldn't quite recall. Most mortals were unremarkable, they slipped so easily from her mind. Still, had she known her son already found himself someone, she wouldn't have bothered to bring Sylpha home. This Shni, such a silly family name, it sounded almost like Sneeze was clearly smitten with her boy as she should be, and she had no desire to interfere with destiny. Still, the more the merrier. Best to have a spare should things went amiss. Or in case things went very right. It was a mother's duty to see to her son's future after all, and she'd spare no expense to see him happy. If that meant giving him, what did they call it in the northern continent? A harem? Ah, yes! That was the word. All the women in the world then so be. She wasn't above having her Grim kidnap a few more, if need be. And if she managed to have a few girls, then naturally, she'd kidnap a few boys for them. 'Twas only fair. For an instant she experienced a glorious vision of the future. Her children would have many children, and the descendants of those children would spread across all of Remnant, gradually replacing these body mortals and their ilk. So why didn't she see herself and Ozma in that glorious utopia? It concerned her. Nero barked a laugh, alerting her as he disarmed Sylpha, but rather than land his third point and end the duel, he kicked the blade back at her. What's wrong? Pick up your sword. We're just getting started. She hesitated, thinking it a trap, the silly girl. Pick it up. Salem shook her head, choosing instead to focus on her son to the exclusion of all else. Sometimes he really did act older than he was. All to the good that, in her day, betrothals were often made at a young age, the better for two partners to learn to love one another. Such didn't always work out, of course, she was a prime example of such, but sometimes they did. And sometimes love came climbing through your tower window when you least expected it. Sometimes love defied death and came back to you. Sometimes love was eternal. Her dear, darling, dashing Ozma. She missed him this last year. Very, very much. Unbidden, she caught herself rubbing her legs together beneath her dress. Perhaps she could get started on making those daughters today. Ahem. Back to the fight. Now that Silpha had retrieved her blade, the duel had resumed with gusto. She and Nero traded blows faster than the mortal eye could see. Being immortal herself, it was but a trifle for Salem to enhance her eyes with magic to follow them. She was no slouch when it came to speed and spells, but her son clearly eclipsed her in both. Might he exceed her? Ozma was both swordsman and healer, but her talents had ever tended toward the realm of destruction, and besides that, creating new grim. Nero, however, seemed to be the best of both worlds and beyond. Here he was having the time of his life, laughing like a mad god as he waged war against the Langley's girl. Laughing like a mad god. A foreign feeling gnawed at Salem as she watched him fight. It wasn't fear. Surely not. Never. Silpha surged forward and the sound of steel striking steel filled the courtyard anew. Nero kicked off the ground and with a subtle display of gravity magic, levitated to make up for the difference in height, then struck back with a dizzying barrage of blows that soon left the Langley's girl on the back foot all over again. Slapping aside an overhead swipe that would have surely taken an arm, he struck back with a jab that bloodied the Langus girl's arm. Spreading a stain of scarlet across her sleeve, she stumbled, and he swept her legs, driving her to the ground. He landed nearly atop her chest, crossed both legs beneath him, and pressed his blade to her throat, pinning her in place. 3. He tooted, lifting the blade just so to draw a bead of blood across her jugular. That's your loss. Shni cheered and thrust a fist into the air, doubtlessly pleased to see her rival in love laid low. I surrender. Nero lowered his weapon, believing himself victorious. Salem wasn't quite so certain, because you see, Silpha was staring at her son. But not just any stare. Oh no, no, no. There was something in that stare of hers, oh dear. She knew that look too. Lord Nero. Without warning, Silpha surged up, grabbed him by the face, and squashed his regal visage against her bosom. You're so wonderfully talented. She cradled him close with a giddy cry. That settles it. Marry me. Nero reacted as expected, much to her amusement. Marry? Maybe when I'm older. Much older. Then I shall wait. She crooned, swaying in place, swinging him to and fro in her arms. There's no rush. You can grow at your own pace. Behind her, Shni finally had enough and stormed in. That's enough. Unhand him at once. Excuse me? Silpha scowled at her. Who are you to command me? I was here fist. You know what they say, first is the worst, second is the best. Salem turned her back on the trio, leaving her son to his fate. He would be fine. Adversity bred excellence after all. Now to hunt down her husband and pin him to the bed. She would have no more thoughts of fear this day. This is troubling. Ozma tapped a finger against his desk as he considered the missive before him. Grim tidings indeed. and not the sort his wife commanded. Would that they could throw Grimm at this problem. Writing on paper, let alone letters, was something of a lost art in remnant these days. Most didn't know how to read or write, such was a secret Salem stringently safeguarded save for a select few, but he'd seen to it that most of those who dwelt in their castle at least learned the art. Indeed, every guard and knight knew their letters, and how to send a missive, even those protecting the border of their kingdom. Especially those. He had argued long and loud with his wife about that one. Their servants needed more than just training, they needed to be capable, able to take initiative during dire times. Which was precisely what made this missive all the more concerning. The message before them wasn't perfect, nor was it written in the usual crisp scrawl to which he'd grown accustomed. The parchment itself had been worn dry by great heat, and, written in a halting hand, spattered with both ink and blood alike. If it was a warning, it made little sense. The desert rises. Garrison destroyed. Swords in the sand? Ozma gave it another once-over just to be sure. He was well aware of the desert dwellers in the west, those hermit-like folk who kept to themselves. They'd never troubled him in Salem before, nor had they trespassed into their domain. So why now? Why wipe out a garrison on the border? What had changed? He looked up. You're certain of this? Knight Commander Aldrich Winchester stood at attention before him, hands tight at his sides. He saluted as Ozma looked on, bearded face grave. Yes, my lord. A rider brought this at dawn, nearly flayed her horse bloody getting here, she did. She rode hard to deliver this. Aldrich was a good man, stout and lion-hearted with piercing green eyes, red hair, and a stern jaw. He had proven himself a leal and loyal subordinate. He prayed that his descendants were of equal worth. Her name? Cassandra Belladonna, my lord. He never quite understood that, though, the need for family names. Back in his day, it has simply been Ozma of Cape Town or Salem of the Lonely Tower. But nowadays it was different. Schnee, Winchester, Belladonna, he had heard tell of strange surnames here in Vale alone. He didn't even want to think of what the manner of myriad names would come from the other continents. Perhaps it was something he should look into. Times were changing. Ozma steepled his hands and laid his chin to rest atop them. And where is this messenger now? Infirmary, my lord. His brow furrowed. Whatever for? She had 6 arrows in her back, my lord. There's no need to keep say my lord. He balked for a moment, quietly incredulous at her survival. This woman might possess valuable information. Will she live? Aldrich thumped his chest and nodded once. With your lord's blessing. Ozma climbed to his feet. I shall see to her come the dawn. Inwardly, however, his mind began to churn. A garrison wiped out? Destroyed? Swords in the sand? It didn't make any sense. Indeed, it sounded too fantastical to be true. Wait. An awful inkling stirred in the back of his mind, bringing him up short. Destroyed. Destruction, could it be? No. He was done doing the bidding of the gods. Surely one of their relics couldn't have surfaced. It was preposterous. At ease, old friend. He waved Winchester down. Double the guard, and send another detachment the border. If there are forces gathering against us, we'd best be prepared. Begging your pardon, my lord, but if the Queen returns. When the Queen returns. Ozma corrected him. We have the Grimm. Why risk good men when we can send in the beasts? Ozma shushed him. That was known only to a few select members of their inner circle, Winchester amongst them. He was loyal, but straightforward. When he saw a problem, his first instinct was to crush it. A good instinct, perhaps, but when one saw every problem as a nail, a hammer was often the easy solution. At length, the weary wizard shook his head. Should we unleash the Grimm upon those of the desert, we may well not be able to stop them. It would set a dangerous precedent. Aldrich didn't budge. It would stop the bastards, teach him a hard lesson. Ozma sighed mournfully. That may well be, but… The doors to his chambers slammed open with a resounding bang. Aldrich jolted in surprise, but his shock paled in comparison to Ozma's own. Husband! Salem sauntered through the archway, arms at her sides, hips swaying in a slow stalk. There you are! I've returned! Burk. She was much unchanged, her hair a bit longer perhaps, her eyes brighter, skin paler, but she was every bit the woman he remembered and loved. When Ozma saw the look in her eyes, however, he gulped. He knew that expression. It was the one she'd worn the night Nero was conceived. That she was wearing it now boded most poorly for his pelvis. She pointed at him. Give me babies. Now. I knew it. Evidently Aldrich Winchester knew that look as well, courtesy of his own wife, because the poor man went pale and snapped off a trembling salute. Would her grace like me to depart for the evening? Salem granted him a smoldering look. Yes, she would. Tell the staff they have the evening off as well. With full pay, of course. Yes, ma'am. Winchester couldn't flee fast enough. He bolted, pausing only to lock the doors behind him before fleeing further still. Ozma shot a sullen glare at him in his wake. This treachery would be remembered. Salem laid a hand on his shoulder, holding him fast. There was no escape. And maybe that was all right. He'd missed her most dearly. Salem. SHHHHH. He tried to speak further, but she wasn't having it. She pressed one finger to his lips to shush him, and with the other, severed the fabric holding up her dress. It pulled at her feet as she stepped out of it, willfully exposing herself to him in all her glory. His mouth ran dry, then drier still as she took a hold of him by the collar and climbed atop his desk, all but dragging him up with her. He laughed, truly unable to help himself. I really don't have a say in this, do I? His wife leaned forward and smiled in sensual, sinful seduction. Her mouth was warm on his. No, you don't. Salem climbed into his lap and tore off his trousers. That settled things. Ozma folded. Silpha settled in? Not immediately and not nicely where Shni was concerned, mind you. The duo became bitter rivals from their very first interaction, but settle in she eventually did, as was her wont. Naruto was well prepared for the fights that followed from the first and quickly quelled them wherever he found them, oftentimes with force when necessary. There were a few growing pains at first, but after he put his foot down with a suitable display of force via knocking their heads together, he felt he could at least leave the two of them alone in the same room without them trying to kill one another. Mostly. In the end, he'd chosen to leave them to their own devices for a day, if only because they needed to learn how to tolerate one another. Wasn't as though he could ask Mom and Dad to discipline them anyway. They were too busy trying to make babies. He could still hear them going at come the dawn. By the lurid sounds emerging from the tower, his first little sister was well on the way. Good for them. He just wished they weren't quite so noisy about it. Hey now! Don't give him that look. He needed his sleep too, you know? So it was that the next day found him wandering the castle walls alone. He made a show of inspecting moats, parapets, trebuchets, and other defenses besides, when in truth he just wanted to get away from the noise for a while. Many a guard saluted and loudly hailed his name when he emerged from the ancillary and auxiliary towers, but he didn't miss the haunted looks in their eyes. Poor bastards. Way up here, one could almost ignore the beastly noises coming from his parents' bedroom. Almost. What was the old saying? Almost only counted in horseshoes and explosive kunai? Yeah, that was the one. Really gotta work on those silencing spells, he mused, doing his best to close his ears against the distant clamor. Maybe make a barrier or something. Never mind me, they're gonna drive the castle crazy at this rate, to say nothing of the town. But he digressed. He would tend to them later. As he gazed out past the castle town, he let his mind wander. From this vantage point really could see just about everything, really. The family castle loomed above everything for miles around, eclipsed only by the mountains, over which he could just glimpse the morning sun rising in all its golden glory. A cool breeze lashed at his pale hair and tugged at the cloak shrouding his shoulders, bringing with it the faint scent of bacon and bread as the kitchen began churning out breakfast below. He took a long moment to inhale, savoring the scent with a fond smile as the wind kissed his cheek, bringing with it the promise of winter. "You'd like this place, Kurama? It has its ups and downs, sure, but it's almost idyllic. And the sights." He could see the farmers hard at work in the fields below, golden fields of wheat and vegetables sprawled out as far as the eye could see. Not perfectly symmetrical, their portions of land deliberately left untouched for the next season, as per his instruction. Crop rotation, he'd called it. The practice of growing different crops in a specific sequence on the same land over a period of years. Supposedly, the method helps maintain soil health by replenishing nutrients, reducing pest and disease problems, and improving overall soil structure. Shikamaru had told him about it once in his last life, and on a whim he decided to try it. He found himself recalling a lot of that lately, little morsels of wisdom imparted to him by his friends, bits of knowledge that could be put to use here in this world, during what was essentially the Middle Ages. Amazing what a proper childhood could give you, eh? He actually found himself thinking these days. Planning. Strategizing, looking forward to the future, quietly bemoaning the mistakes of his past while learning from them and resolving to do better. Much better. A wry smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He'd been a bit dense-dolt the first time around, hadn't he? Looking past the fields, his gaze eventually settled upon the mountains. Well, what was left of them after he'd accidentally blown up that one in the middle. At this height, he could clearly see just how much his little stunt back then had inadvertently altered the landscape itself. Where once there stood a trio of impassable peaks, he'd created a canyon of sorts between the twins that remained, one that eventually led to the desert wastes of the land beyond the border of their kingdom, a land he dubbed as Vacuo. The center of the vast desert was an oasis unlike anything he'd ever seen. A jungle bursting with natural resources, geographical defenses, and, if scouts were to be believed, the world's largest recorded deposit of dust. Nomads that survived the journey across the scorching sands settled down in this little hidden gem, and thus, a kingdom was born. That was where the well of his knowledge ran dry. The ever-shifting sands obscured all, and he very much doubted the Vacuans were fond of visitors. Still, he couldn't quite contain his curiosity and wondered what their kingdom was like. How did their culture work? Had they discovered electricity yet? Were they making proper use of all that dust, or were they simply letting it fall by the wayside? So many questions. The scholar in him cried out for answers. "I want to see. I want to know. I want to investigate." He stamped a foot without thinking, thoughtlessly cracking stone under his boot. Several nearby guards flinched. Whoops, gotta watch those childish impulses. The urge to simply leap off the castle walls and run across the continent was strong, if only because he knew himself actually capable of doing so. With his superior speed, it would be a trifle to cross the wastes and reach that oasis himself. He might even make it before dehydration set in, probably. This body of his wasn't physically mature yet, and he hadn't really pushed himself before, you know? Maybe just a peek. A quick test to see how much he was really capable of. Surely no one would notice his absence. The wind tugged at his hair, bringing with it a swirl of autumn leaves. Just a touch. A little thing. Patience, little sapling. The desert will keep a while longer. You are needed here. Wait a minute, had he heard a woman's voice just now? And why did he find himself thinking of a giant tree? Probably his imagination. Yup. For sure. Had to be. He was going to pretend so regardless. Kurama was the one and only voice in his head, and he was gone. He'd accept no substitutes. Stop getting distracted, scatterbrain. He chided himself with a shake of the head. Focus. You have a ton to do here, adventuring can come later. Coughing into a fist, he shook his head and restrained himself. There would be time aplenty for vacuo in the future. For now he had duties to which he must attend. He could wait. After all, he had nothing but curiosity and time. Still, it wouldn't do to become complacent now, would it? Comfort bred weakness. He would not be caught unawares. That said, his schedule was free for the moment, with no pressing demands on his time aside from the need to slap some silencing seals around the castle. Shouldn't be too hard, that provided they functioned as intended, of course. Wasn't like they could make his parents any louder now, could he? Perish the thought. Humming to himself, he raised his right hand and sketching a golden glyph in the air before himself with one finger, forming the concentric shape of 3 overlapping suns. The image served as a rudimentary magic circle of sorts, then reached out with his free hand and began to tweak it to suit his needs. Distantly, he heard a few of the guards gasp and mutter amongst themselves, likely awed by such effortless magical prowess, but it was a small matter to tune them out. On second thought, he probably shouldn't. The last thing he wanted to do was create a void bereft of all sound or worse, eradicate it altogether. He wasn't looking to do anything so drastic, merely muffle a certain frequency of noise, or rather, the incessant racket his parents were making as they did the deed. Now there was a mental image he didn't need. Shaking his head, he focused on the task at hand. Already the glyph had grown greatly in his grasp, no surprise there given how much mana he was forcing into it, but the shape of the suns shone brighter than ever before, radiating warmth in his hand. Belatedly he realized it wasn't a glyph at all anymore, but rather something he'd infused his own power into. Something more. Mom had a name for it, a lost art from time immemorial, long before the gods had thrown their tantrum and forsaken remnant. Supposedly her father, his grandfather, had practiced it. Not glyphs, but something far more potent, something forgotten by the world when it was whole. Runes. For how could the act of carving magic into items be anything runecraft? Just as glyphs were the outward representation of magic, runes were the ancient art of imbuing that magic into a physical form, locking it in place, and enhancing something. The idea of creating a silencer was merely one of many ideas he had. With these, he could change the world. Thoughts for later. For now, in a matter of minutes he had a functional prototype of sorts made, and would you look at that, willing test subjects. Spinning on his heel, he gestured to the guards on the wall, one and all. Step right up, gentlemen. He waved the string of now glowing runes at them. With these, I can promise you all a good night's sleep. No need to tell them twice. His magical prowess was rather well known in the castle by now. The poor bastards practically threw themselves at him in their haste to muffle the incessant noise his parents were making. By the end he had them line up nice and neat-like so he could apply the glyphs to their armor. Most preferred their gauntlets and breastplates besides, though one requested he brand a glove and another their necklace, and a third their ring, which in turn made for even easier marking on his part. Each wore them like a badge of honor, as though they'd been personally blessed by him. They hadn't, of course, not really, he'd simply used them as his guinea pigs. Was it wrong that he didn't feel any guilt in doing this? None whatsoever, really. Should he? It was just armor and accessories, after all. They could always take them off. He wasn't about to go burning runes into people yet, however. He was no Orochimaru. Nope, he'd save those tests for himself, and only once he was certain there wouldn't be any unpleasant side effects. He didn't fancy the idea of having to rip off and regrow a hand because he applied the wrong rune. Regardless, it was a tentative success for now, one he looked forward to replicating later. He accepted the guards' praise as was his due, shook their hands, sent them on their way, both to get a good rest and to spread the word to the rest of the castle staff. It also allowed him to be alone in this moment. He'd need to work on larger version of that glyph soon, but that wasn't any fun, that was work. He felt unfulfilled just thinking about it. A sullen sigh escaped him as his shoulders slumped at the thought. His heart really wasn't in this project. It was too easy. He craved a challenge, something that would actually challenge him, push him, test his limits. Like that mysterious mage. Anyone capable of creating a weapon that might be able to hurt and kill him was worthy of interest. Who was she? What was she like? Where did she come from? Why did she want him dead? He needed answers. And the only way was to track her down. But that involved sneaking out the castle, which was gonna be a pain, if only because his absence would be instantly noticed. Shadow clones, maybe? He wasn't keen on revealing that talent just yet. Best to keep a few aces up his sleeve. Another idea dawned. Now that I've finally got a minute to myself, I should probably work on some of my techniques. Maybe give OL the spirit gun a try? He mimed, pointing a finger gun high into the sky, and chuckled hoarsely. Always wanted to use one of those, but I really want to see if I can recreate the Kamehameha. What? Back before he'd become a ninja, he'd enjoyed his cartoons as a kid, or anime as they were called. Creating weapons was all well and good, but these days, he found himself drifting toward nostalgia. It shouldn't be hard in theory. If the spirit gun was akin to firing off a bullet, then this was a beam, something you couldn't really do with chakra alone. But magic? The sky was the limit, ergo, there was none. And hey, beams were cool. He'd always wanted to fire one off, you know? Surely a little test wouldn't hurt. Naruto looked left, then right, making sure no one was in sight. Sure, he wanted to practice, but he didn't want anyone to see him practicing. It was embarrassing, you know? He still had his pride. Here goes. A nervous little laugh escaped him as he placed his wrists together, cupped his fingers, drew them back, then pushed his mana through them. He felt rather than saw the pinprick of gleaming light within as he settled into a stance. In truth, a chant really wasn't necessary, but he was a sucker for the classics. Ka-me. The light swelled in his grasp. Ha-me. Alright, that was a lot of power. Better aim this somewhere, SA. My lord! Please! A moment of your time. Naruto jumped with a yelp. In that split second of inattention, his concentration slipped. All hell broke loose. A blazing blue beam burst from his hands, and his first thought was to wrench his arms upward, thereby avoid hitting anything important, but even then he failed to account for just how much energy he'd packed into his palms, or rather, put into the blast itself. It couldn't be contained, it demanded release. The backlash blasted him from his feet and tore the spell from his grasp, leaving it to arc up, up and away, towards the broken moon. Surely it wouldn't reach that far, right? It wasn't that strong, right? He hadn't put that much power into it, right? There was just no way. Wrong. To his great chagrin, he would look back upon this day and burn with embarrassment for years to come. He'd underestimated himself. The beam pierced the clouds, then the heavens, followed by the upper atmosphere. All this in an instant. As he looked on in mute horror, it scorched through the already shattered lunar orb, burning through the celestial debris furled not unlike the gods of darkness long ago. By blind bloody luck, he didn't destroy it outright, though it might have been better had he done so. Already he could see a score of falling fragments tumbling from space towards the lands of vacuo in the form of a great many firing meteors. A bead of sweat ran down his brow. Vacuo was mostly desert, right? Maybe no one would notice. I don't think I can fix that. My lord. Naruto spun around with a sputter, red-faced and swearing as he frantically hid both hands behind his back. Fat load of good it did him. The deed was done. Gah! He buried his head in his hands with a groan. Don't look at my shame. Why didn't I just use the spirit gun? What was I thinking? Idiot! Fool! Moron! Aldrich Winchester stood before him, jaw hanging open, beard and visage twisted in disbelief. Naruto winced inwardly. He'd been so distracted, so lost in his own thoughts, that he hadn't heard the man's approach until the last moment. but it was his own fault for mucking up. Mom and Dad were gonna kill him. You didn't see anything. But my lord. Naruto thrust a finger at him, the lone digit crackling with blue light. You saw nothing. The Knight Commander of the Guard stared at him for a moment, more utterly poleaxed before he managed to recover. In the end, he thumped an armored fist to his chest and bowed his head, momentarily obscuring his face from view as he nodded his acquiescence. Understood, my prince. Prince. Still getting used to that. In his last life he'd fought and scraped and clawed for recognition. It was so strange to simply be born into it, and have everyone bowing before merely due to an accident of birth. And now he blasted the moon by accident. Fresh shame had him blushing anew. Blast, but the man was still staring at him. Did you need something? Credit where it was due, Winchester didn't hesitate. He never did. Removed the fist from his chest, he straightened up, looked him square in the eye and spoke his mind. We need your help, my lord. Blunt and to the point as always. He liked that. The man was a credit to his lineage. Don't think about the moon, don't think about the moon. Whatever you do, don't think about the moon. Pretend nothing happened. Sensational. Naruto clapped his hands with a stilted laugh, turned his back on the sundered moon and walked away, refusing to acknowledge his spectacular blunder. Let's talk while we walk. He made for the stairs with all due haste, determined to be gone from the scene of the crime before anyone realized what happened. It'll be faster that way. Credit where it was due, Winchester fell neatly into step behind him without question. There's a scout from the border in dire need of healing, a woman carrying vital intelligence, near death. The king said he would tend her on the morrow, but we have seen neither hide nor hair of him since last night, and there have been frightful noises coming from his tower. A fresh moan carried to them on the wind even as he spoke. Winchester coughed. You can imagine my dilemma. I've no desire to have my collarbone broke a second time. Heat crept up the back of Naruto's neck and into his face besides. Right, silencing runes. Gotta finish those. I'll handle it. Here at last, Winchester faltered. My lord? I said I'll handle it. Cresting the last of the stairs, he reached the courtyard, pausing just long enough to nod toward a nearby ravishingly red-headed servant. He didn't recognize this one. Someone new. Thinking nothing of it, he shook his head and looked back to Winchester. Unless you want to disturb my parents? Winchester shook his head. I'd rather not. Then take me to this scout of yours. And hey, he joked for the sake of levity, if she doesn't survive, I can always run experiments on her corpse. Winchester slapped a hand to his forehead. Gods! I don't think this boy's got all his marbles. Naruto quirked a brow over his shoulder. What was that? Nothing, my prince. The castle infirmary left much to be desired. Naruto was no fan of hospitals to begin with, having spent more than his fair share of time in them during his first life, but even he had to admit the facilities of the Leaf were far and away superior to whatever this was. Sparse and damp were two words that came to mind for this so-called place of healing. He'd never been sick a day in his life, so he never had reason to come here. Such was his dismay when he found himself gazing upon a stone ceiling, stone floors, stone walls with only a sparse window slit for lighting amidst a series of 6 beds, only one of which was occupied. There was what he assumed to be a cabinet for poultices and herbs stashed there the corner alongside a roll of clean linen cloth, and that was it. Honestly, this place was hardly clean or hygienic. Sakura would have thrown a fit if she saw this, cussed out the staff, and browbeat them into proper compliance. The thought drew a rueful smile to the corner of his mouth. Note to self, look into medical stuff from my world, these people could probably use it. He was no Sakura Haruno. He knew next to nothing about medicine and even less when it came herbs. If she hadn't forced him to take a class with her that one time, he wouldn't know anything at all. Even then, he'd only inherited his miraculous healing ability thanks to Hashirama. Chakra was kinda cheatin' though. He found himself struggling to scrounge up what little he recalled of Sakura's brief tutelage as he turned his attention to the sole-occupied bed. A sleeping young woman with long dark hair lay sprawled across it, rolled onto her right side, all but dead to the world. She wore the armor of a Valiant scout, mottled green trousers mixed with ashen black, though her top had been peeled away to reveal a bandaged bosom and badly bloody back. She wasn't pale, but neither could she be called tan either. Anyone guarding the border between veil and vacuole was gonna be bronzed a bit. 2 fuzzy cat ears jutted up from the mess of her hair. One was burnt, while the other looked as though someone had carved a piece from it. No, wait, that wasn't right. Pausing, he crouched before her and took said ear between 2 fingers with a frown. A clean cut. More than clean, there was no blood, like the upper part of it had simply been destroyed, or rather ceased to be. Yet it appeared recent. The hair on the back of his neck rose. What kind of weapon did that? Glancing over his shoulder, he looked to Winchester. She's the one? The Knight Commander nodded once behind him, not trusting himself to speak, not that he could blame him. This lady was in a bad way. Her breathing was slow and uneven, her brows slick with sweat. All the trademark signs of a fever. Grimacing, Naruto turned his attention to her back and, mumbling an apology, began peeling back the bandages. What he found there drew a soft hiss from his lips. 6 holes. Deep ones. Not from a blade, but something just as deadly. Arrows. Winchester confirmed his concern with a sigh. The lass took a great many of them. Practically fell off her horse at the gate. She'd ridden in such a condition? Judging by the smell, her wounds were on the verge of turning. Not a good sign. He remembered as much. She was hanging on by a thread. He'd need to work fast. Best to start with the fever first. If that got too high, she might lose her life. Then again, he couldn't just flood her body with chakra straight out the gate. She was already on death's doorstep and the shock might well push her through. Couldn't have that now, could they? He had to be careful. Carefully, he laid his hands on her back. The woman mumbled something in her fevered sleep and thrashed out of his grasp. No. You're all right. He made to hold her still, but she squirmed out of his grasp with surprising tenacity. Just hold still. I'm trying to help. Malik. His brow furrowed. Who in blazes was Mal? Her palm cracked across his face, shattering that thought to send him reeling backwards. Dazed but unhurt, he blinked stars from his vision and shook his head to clear them. Huh. That's odd. I didn't feel any pain. The woman's hand came whistling in again. He instinctively caught it by the wrist without looking, wrenched her arm down, and held it there until his vision cleared completely. That was unwise, he sighed, blinking the last lingering spots from his vision. Lucky for you I'm a nice guy. She didn't answer with words but made a strangled noise instead, and it didn't take him long to see why. His eyes were open wide, revealing frightful orbs of molten gold, glazed with fever and pain as she gasped fitfully for air. He didn't think she even truly saw him. Such lovely eyes. Cassandra Belladonna, right? You're okay. He gripped her hand and laid his free palm over her knuckles in what he hoped was a soothing gesture. No one's gonna hurt you. Promise. Her face slackened in confusion. Where am I? Winchester stepped in and took a hold of her other wrist before she could get it into her head to attack again. Now, lass? The commander tutored with surprising gentleness for one so large. You're quite delirious. This is Veil and that, with a nod Naruto's way, is Prince Nero. You're in good hands. Belladonna's ears flattened atop her head. The prince. Naruto adopted what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Yup. The one and only. The scout blinked slowly, tried to speak, failed now as her eyes rolled back in her head. Watch it, Winchester. I think she's about to. Wordlessly, she slumped, going boneless in his grasp. Naruto caught her awkwardly, and with some help on Aldrich's part, lowered Cassandra back to the bed. Only then did he glance Winchester's way. Can you hold her still? I need both hands for this. Not a problem, my lord. With great care he took a hold of her arms and affixed them above her head to the bed frame with a bit of twine. As he did, Naruto noticed the tattoo etched into the underside of Belladonna's arm, that of a nevermore flaring its wings, had thrown back in a triumphant cry. What's that? Winchester's brow shot into his ruddy red hair. Gods be good. She's one of Salem's shadows. Naruto turned a keen look on him. One of my mother's what now? Winchester instantly realized his mistake. He'd said something he shouldn't have and clammed up faster than father at dinner. Naruto kept staring until the man faltered under his gaze. They are Her Majesty's elite, he replied reluctantly. Her daggers in the dark. All who serve her bear the mark. A pale brow rose. And you know this how? The knight commander coughed and looked away. My wife serves with them. You have a wife? Please don't sound so surprised, my prince. So Mom had a band of assassins in her employ? Neat. From there, he was able to tease a brief explanation out of Winchester. Apparently these so-called shadows were a small secretive society numbering nearly a dozen hand-picked men and women who served Salem's will, a group he probably wasn't supposed to know about. Then again, he wasn't supposed to know a lot of things. Say what you would about Mom, but she wasn't inefficient. When she saw talent, she seized it. No wonder this woman had survived. She must have incredible willpower, that, or she was stubborn. Most cats were, weren't they? Tooting softly to himself, he looked back to Cassandra and considered his options. He really shouldn't be showcasing his talents like this, yet if he left her as she was, she would undoubtedly die. What to do, whatever should he do? An idea dawned. Technically speaking, it was immoral to do this. Cassandra Belladonna was dying, she had hours left at best. But if he didn't do something, she would die. His parents were very much occupied at the moment, and while he had no doubt that Ozma would do something if he poked his head into that room, he had no desire to interfere with them. He really wanted a little sister, you know. Those are all excuses, he knew. In reality, he had been looking for a chance to do this for quite some time. An opportunity. A chance to prove himself and his theory. He couldn't heal her all at once, not without placing undue stress on her body, stress that might kill her. She needed to start healing herself first. And he had just the way to help her. Winchester. The knight commander saluted. My prince? Said prince turned to glare at him. Don't breathe a word of this to anyone. As he looked on, Winchester clapped both hands over his ears like a good soldier. What's that, sir? I can't hear you, sir. You'll have to speak up, sir. Naruto preened a little, pleased by the display. Good soldiers follow orders, but better soldiers know the reason those orders are given in the first place. Winchester was a career soldier. Maybe he'd see his way to doing for him what he was about to do for Cassandra. After all, assuming this worked on a dying woman, it would do wonders for someone like him. No time like the present, then. Laying his hands on Belladonna, he closed his eyes and began to hum. All right, then. His eyes bled red as he spoke and his voice darkened, dropping an octave as it thrummed with dark magic. Here goes nothing, and everything, I guess. Was this death? It certainly felt like an end. No light, none at all. They always said there would be light. Why wasn't there any light? Cassandra Belladonna floated in the void without relief. Darkness abounded as far as the eye could see, clinging to every inch of her. She searched high and low, Yet she beheld only the abyss. An endless chasm of shadow wherever she looked, an impenetrable gloom ready to swallow her whole. If this was death, then she deserved it. This was all her fault. After all she had seen and done, maybe it was better this way. She was a coward, and a fool and a traitor, unworthy of the Queen's mark. Failure. Because that's what she was, wasn't she? She remembered the shouts, the screams, the shrieks, the fire, the blood, and the sword. That awful, horrid desert dwellers had come in force. The garrison never stood a chance. Vacuo swept over them in a sandstorm and all was lost. Even then they might have managed some semblance of a defense, or fought back at the very least if it weren't for the sword. It cut through armor like butter, blasted aside shields aside as if they weren't even there, cleaved stone as though it were water. Worse was the man who wielded the accursed thing. That thing wearing the shape of the man. The demon with the sword. His image haunted her every breath. She had seen cut down dozens, walk through arrows, mow down cavalry with ease. His laughter, his warped white armor, his infernal rasping cough. She was still alive thanks to him, but not from mercy, no, he'd let her live as a warning. A message. He'd found her upon the battlefield, back full of arrows, and smiled. She would never forget that smile. The way his eyes gleamed in the harsh sunlight, the cruel curve of his lips as he spoke. Look at you, wasted and gasping for air. But you don't get to go yet, little kitten. I have need of you. Belladonna shivered, clutching herself in the dark, not wanting to remember the words, to relive the nightmare when she resolve wavered and she broke. Yet she did all the same. Run. She recalled that brutal bastard's laugh, his sordid steel kissing her neck, the bloodied blade lifting her chin and forcing to look upon him, seeing scarred visage as he removed his mask for her to witness the horror of his face. Run to Vale. Run to your queen. Tell her Malik the Sunderer is coming. Tell her Vacuo is mine. Tell her I have the sword and soon I shall possess the other three. Belladonna remembered that instant, his bright slitted golden eyes leering down at her, making her feel small. Was he a man? A faunus? It didn't matter. He simply was. He dragged her to her feet with one of his many arms and slapped her across the face and shoved her, forcing her away. Run, little cat! It was that moment in which she truly broke. She'd stumbled away, his laughter trailing after her. Run! So she ran. Like a coward. Turned her back and fled. She'd stolen the first horse she could find and whipped it bloody getting back to Vale. Rather than fight and die with her garrison, her legion, her brothers and sisters in arms, she fled like a coward, because they had to know, because someone had to warn the king and queen. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that she was alive for a reason. Excuses, excuses? The man Malik must have done something to her, used some foul magic to prolong her life just enough so that she might reach the castle. But whatever dark gift she'd been given had long since expired. She could feel herself slipping away, falling into the black. Gods, she was so tired. She just wanted to rest. Hadn't she earned that? Run! Belladonna shivered anew. Even in death she wasn't rid of him. Make it stop, please, just make it stop. For it is in ambition that we achieve immortality. Was that a voice? Who? They sounded so familiar. Through this, we become a paragon of innovation and creation to surpass all. Warm words wrapped around her soul. In defiance of death, I release your soul, devour your dread, and by my shoulder protect thee. Hold on, now she saw a light. No, that wasn't quite right, she was the light. Her hands, her arms, her very body shimmered with a faint sheen of violet light, not dark, but bright all the same. It was warm too, as though she had been wrapped in a warm blanket and given a warm cup of cider to drink. With it, gradually, her fear began to abate. Incredulous, she balked at herself. Is this magic? Not entirely sure, actually. The voice replied, finally sounding a little sheepish. Might call it aura. Bit of a working title there, sorry about that. Belladonna craned her neck, but despite the light shimmering around her, still found only darkness. Where are you? Show yourself. Well, this is the inside of your soul, so. Without warning, a golden figure burst in the black before her, shining like a second sun. She yelped, startled by his arrival, even more so as he turned towards her. She couldn't see his face, or any other discernible part of his feature for that matter. He was simply light in the dark, golden burning brilliance manifesting in the shape of a man. No, wait, she told a lie. He was a boy, not a man. He was tall, but not yet fully grown, she could tell by his proportions. Still. Bright. So bright. She couldn't see. The strange boy clapped his hands. How's this? He sounded like Prince Nero. But that wasn't possible. No one, not even the prince, could possess such power. Shading her face with an arm, she struggled to stare at him. What are you? I have a few names. The light dimmed somewhat, and belatedly, she thought she might have glimpsed something like a smile upon his glowing visage. I've been called so many things. But you might know me as the prince. This was actually him, then? What do you want? He barked a laugh, light and air, yet it sounded older somehow. To save you, silly? Suspicion reared its ugly head in her heart. No, she growled back at him. What do you really want? Why go to all this effort for me? Her question seemed to surprise Prince Nero, if only for a moment. Honestly? He clasped both hands behind his head and craned his neck a few degrees to the right. Freedom. The freedom not just to wield my power the way I like, the right way without having to answer to anyone, but to use that freedom and make this world a better place. Yet for that I need a student. A pupil. Wait, that's not it. Lowering his arms, he crossing them before his chest and frowned to himself, struggling for the right words. An apprentice. Exclaiming happily, he snapped his fingers. That's the one. He trailed off, gaze piercing hers, leaving her to make her own conclusions. Realization broke within her like the dawn. And you believe I'm that apprentice? His head bobbed in a nod. You could be. I'm more than twice your age. Salem's son chuckled ruefully. Hey now. You're never too old to learn. Honestly, I wasn't entirely certain this would work. This is the first time I've ever meddled with someone's soul. So in lieu of a long explanation, unclasping his hands, he offered her a palm. What do you say? Take my hand? Anything to get her out of here. Belladonna seized it. Almost immediately, the darkness was burned away by his light. Open your eyes. In an instant the shadows fell away. It was as if she had been living a dream. One moment she was on death's doorstep, in the next he took a hold of her and drew her back from the brink. Her eyes snapped open to find two faces peering over her, one a bearded man she belatedly recognized as Knight Commander Winchester, and the other, weary and streaked with sweat. Hey you! Naruto, how did she know that name? Beamed back at her and wiped his brow. You're finally awake. Gods be good. She hadn't been hallucinating. That was actually the prince. Which meant. Belladonna thrashed upright, one arm over her bosom. She felt nothing. No pain. Fumbling, she tried to place a hand upon her back, only to find healthy, unblemished skin in its wake. She'd actually been healed. But that meant. Someone draped a coat over her shoulders. Swiveling, she turned her gaze upon the prince. His piercing eyes met hers, one eye fluttered shut and open in a quick blink. Congratulations, Cassandra Belladonna. You pass. Pass. She gazed down at her hands. Prince Nero, I mean, my Lord Nero, what did you do to me? He noticed, naturally. Naruto, eh? He thumbed his chin, considering her anew. I'm surprised you know that name. Seems there was some residual feedback. Some of your memories must have mingled with mine, and mine yours. Gotta watch out for that in the future. Still Malik though. Her heart clenched. Then you know about this Malik guy. He waved a hand, wholly unconcerned. Yup. Got a glimpse into your thoughts when I unlocked your soul. He might be fun to fight. Fun? In what world was fighting a monster like Malik fun? But to answer your question again, I used a small portion of my power to unlock your latent potential. You shouldn't have anything to fear from him now. Her heartbeat quickened as she met his gaze. Her fingers clenched into fists, then unclenched as she struggled to process his words. So you gave me magic? He shrugged. In all honesty, I'm not sure. Abruptly, he clapped his hands. In any case, we're going out. There's something I want to investigate in town, and I need a bodyguard. You and Winchester will do. The Knight Commander, silent until now, sighed. I've no say in this, do I? The prince turned a winning smile upon him. You do not. Belladonna balked. But the queen is currently pulverizing my father's pelvis in the pursuit of providing me with siblings. A pale brow rose as her face flushed at the implications. But if you want to bother them, then by all means. Her face flushed. Never mind. That's what I thought. Laughing, he made for the door. Come along, apprentice. There's work to do. Cassandra Belladonna lingered, gaze falling upon his back. He was just a child. What manner of man might he become? Her eyes lingered between his shoulders, and for a moment, an instant, she saw what he would become. It was not an unpleasant image. She would serve him till her dying day. Naruto glanced over his shoulder. Are you two coming or not? She bowed. Yes, my lord. Great. He waved a hand as she fell into step with him with Winchester. We're gonna be out for a while. Hopefully Schnee and Silpha are getting along. Schnee Razor stared at Silpha Langley's, blade drawn. Silpha stared back, sword in hand. It was war. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comment section how was the story. And also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.